Chapter 289. The Sword Pavilion was located in a valley within the Void Sword Realm. Due to the fact that it had been opened several times, the Sword Pavilion was one of the few well-known treasure lands within the Void Sword Realm. At this moment, there was a magnificent pavilion within the valley. Due to the defensive formation engraved around it, the Sword Pavilion was not dilapidated. It looked simple and majestic. In the middle of the pavilion, there was a plaque with the words, Sword Pavilion, written on it. It looked as if it had been there for a long time and had a sharp edge that was hard to look at. At the entrance of the valley, there were many figures. The genius disciples of some forces had all gathered here. After all, the Sword Pavilion was one of the safest treasure lands. There was no danger to one's life. At the same time, if one was lucky enough, one could obtain extraordinary swordsmanship and cultivation techniques. For example, the Void Sword technique of the Limitless Sword sect was passed down from the Sword Pavilion. Moreover, the Void Sword technique was not the most advanced swordsmanship in the Sword Pavilion. One should know that the Void Sword faction in ancient times was extremely prosperous. Its strength was even greater than the current 7 major forces combined. It could be seen how rich its foundation was. How could there only be spiritual level sword techniques in the Sword Pavilion of such a large sect? Not far away, Yiguchin's figure flashed over. He did not use the vermilion bird wings. Firstly, it was too conspicuous. Secondly, the vermilion bird wings could also be used as a hidden life-saving means. It was best not to expose it. Is that the Sword Pavilion? Although he had not yet entered the Sword Pavilion, Yiguchin could feel the sword chi contained in the Sword Pavilion just by looking at it from the outside. This was an irresistible temptation for sword cultivators. As Yiguchin approached the entrance of the valley, he saw Chu Qingqi and the other disciples of the sword sect's inner yard. Almost all the geniuses and elites of other forces were there. Only the Saber-Sealing King Palace was not there. Yiguchin thought that perhaps the saber cultivators of the Saber-Sealing King Palace were incompatible with the Sword Pavilion. There was no need to waste time here. Brother Yiguchin, you're here. Chu Qingqi and the others' eyes lit up when they saw Yiguchin. Yiguchin glanced around and saw Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and Mu Xingzu. In the inner court, Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, Ji Ling, Li Lingxiao, Ting Jingshan, and the others were waiting. Compared to the enthusiasm of Chu Qingqi and the others, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others were cold and indifferent. Yiguchin did not mind and did not greet him. There was no need for him to stick his warm face to someone's cold butt. Senior brother Yi. Mu Xingzu called out tenderly. Then, she landed in front of Yiguchin like a young swallow returning to its nest. What's wrong? Yiguchin frowned when he saw the trace of uneasiness in Mu Xingzu's watery eyes. It's nothing serious. It's just that Xingzhu feels like there's a ghost following behind Xingzhu. Mu Xingzu pursed her lips and frowned. Although she was resilient, she was still a young girl. She was still very afraid when faced with ghosts and supernatural things. Ghost? How is that possible? Yiguchin shook his head slightly. It's true. A blue ghost shadow seems to be watching Xingzhu from the shadows. Mu Xingzu's large eyes darted around and looked around suspiciously. Suddenly, Yiguchin shuddered. This was a subconscious reaction when encountering danger. Who is it? Yiguchin suddenly turned his head and looked at the dense forest in the distance. However, there was nothing. But just now, Yiguchin did feel that there was a gaze behind him. However, it was that gaze that made Yiguchin feel extreme danger. His hair stood on end. That faint sense of oppression was something that even Qin Baijian and the other spirit bridge experts could not give him. Senior brother Yi, do you believe me now? Mu Xingzu bit her lip and grabbed Yiguchin's sleeve. Don't worry. There are many people here. Nothing serious will happen. Let's put this matter aside for the time being. I will think of a way. Yiguchin frowned and comforted Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu instinctively trusted Yiguchin. Now that she was comforted, she calmed down. Who is it? But it's useless to think about it now. If it's really an unpredictable existence, it's futile to resist. Yiguchin put this matter aside for the time being and focused on the opportunities in the sword pavilion. At this moment, the defensive formation around the sword pavilion was flowing with light and seemed to be trembling. The sword pavilion is about to open. Chu Qingqi's eyes were also filled with anticipation. How do I obtain the sword techniques in the sword pavilion? Yiguchin asked curiously. Brother Yi, do you know why the opportunities in the sword pavilion have not been taken away even though the void sword realm has opened several times? Chu Qingqi kept him in suspense. I'd like to hear the details, Yiguchin said. The jade slips that record the sword techniques in the sword pavilion are all sealed in balls of light. According to the colors and strength of the balls of light, the level of the sword techniques contained in them are also different. These balls of light can only be obtained by those who are fated to obtain them. If not, it will be difficult to obtain them, Chu Qingqi explained. I see. It's so strange. Yiguchin's eyes were filled with interest. He was very curious about what his opportunities would be. Rumble. Just as Yiguchin was thinking, the defensive formation trembled even more violently, as if the sword pavilion was about to open. However, at this moment, Murong Ditian stepped out from among the disciples of the Wuji sword sect. He glanced at Yiguchin with a playful and vengeful smile in his eyes. Everyone, I am Murong Ditian, a disciple of the Sun Moon Hall of the Wuji sword sect. I would like to make a suggestion. Murong Ditian's words attracted the attention of all the disciples of the various forces. Murong Ditian was originally the #1 genius in the Donglin mansion and had an extraordinary reputation. After joining the Wuji sword sect, he entered the Sun Moon Hall to cultivate almost immediately. After that, he improved rapidly and reached the third transformation of the godly soul realm. His words carried some weight and attracted the attention of everyone. Everyone knows that the opportunities in the sword pavilion are obtained by those who are fated to obtain them. However, if we allow some people with low talent and no strength to enter, not only will they disrupt the situation, but they will also waste the opportunities. Do you think such people are qualified to enter? Murong Ditian's tone was indifferent as he spoke. Hearing those words, many of the geniuses nodded inwardly. Yiguchin furrowed his brows quietly. As expected, in the next moment, Murong Ditian's words changed. His eyes were like swords as he looked at Yiguchin and said, for example, Yiguchin's cultivation is crippled and his strength is low. What qualifications does he have to enter the sword pavilion to obtain the opportunities? Following Murong Ditian's cold shout, the gazes of all the disciples from the various powers uniformly landed on Yiguchin. In an instant, many people's eyes flickered as they pondered. After all, it was every man for himself. Although there were many people who admired Yiguchin's character, most of them were still selfish and only thought of their own benefits. That's right. Yiguchin's cultivation is crippled. What qualifications does he have to enter the sword pavilion? Xianing stepped out from the Wuji sword sect's camp. During the elite gathering, it could be said that he had become a huge laughingstock because of Yiguchin. He even lost to Yiguchin in the void sword technique. This caused Xianing to be mocked by everyone when he returned to the Wuji sword sect. Therefore, Xianing hated Yiguchin to the core. As for Xianhao, he stood at the front of the Wuji sword sect's disciples. He did not say anything and did not express his opinion. It was as if he did not care about anything else and did not care about Yiguchin's crippled cultivation. That's right. I also think that Yiguchin does not have the qualifications. On the other side, Prince Yuanyi also stood out from the Saint Origin Academy with a cold smile on his face. Young Ho Fangchen, who was beside him, stood in the same camp as him. I also agree that Yiguchin does not have the qualifications to enter. A gaze filled with anger looked at Yiguchin. It was the little flame emperor of the 3 imperial palaces, Ji Yan. I also think that a cripple like Yiguchin does not have the qualifications to enter. On the Consonance Palace's side, Pan Shuoyan twisted her slender waist and said with a playful and mocking tone. She looked at Yiguchen as if she wanted to enjoy Yiguchen's embarrassed and angry look. At this moment, many opposing sky prides stood out to force Yiguchen to step down. Chapter 290. Outside the sword pavilion, the air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Feeling the gazes of the elites, the inner court disciples of the sword sect pagoda slightly changed their expressions. It would be fine if it was just one faction targeting them, but because of Yiguchen, the limitless sword sect, Saint Origin Academy, 3 imperial palaces, and Rhinoceros Divine Palace all stood out. The impact was huge. Even Ji Ling and the other inner court geniuses had grave expressions. However, Yiguchen, who was at the center of the storm, was still as calm as water. His gaze swept across everyone. He wasn't angry, wasn't embarrassed, and spoke with a very calm tone. Who dares to attack? You can try. Yiguchen's hands were behind his back. Although he didn't emit any true chi, his imposing aura was still shocking. Yiguchen, do you still think you're the sword sect of the past? Saying such words now is just a joke. Murong Ditien took a step forward. Not only him, but the Sun Moon Hall disciples, Rhinoceros Divine Palace's Pan Shuoyan, 3 Imperial Palaces Ji Yan, Saint Origin Academy's Prince Yuani, Fang Chen, and the others all stepped forward at the same time. All of a sudden, all the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda, including Yiguchen, were surrounded by several factions. Other disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda, do you think what I said makes sense? Is Yiguchen not qualified to enter? Murong Ditien's tone had a trace of playfulness as he looked at the group of people of the Sword Sect Pagoda. In your dreams. Ji Ling was the first to step forward. She had an extroverted personality and was more like a big sister. Moreover, she was ranked 4th in the inner court, so she naturally had the qualifications to step forward. Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, Mu Xingzu, and the others also stood beside Yiguchen and looked at him with hostility. At this moment, a discordant voice sounded from the inner court. I think what Murong Ditien said makes sense. If one doesn't have the strength, entering is just a waste of opportunity. Once this was said, many inner court disciples' expressions changed. Ji Ling's expression also changed slightly as she turned towards the person who spoke. It was none other than Wang Xiaotian, ranked 3rd in the inner yard. What nonsense are you talking about? Yiguchen is a disciple of my sword sect's inner court. Could it be that you're siding with an outsider? Ji Ling rebuked. I'm just telling the truth. Wang Xiaotian shrugged. Not only that, but Li Lingxiao, who ranked 6th in the inner yard, also said, I also think that it's better for Yiguchen to stay outside. Even if he enters, he won't be able to obtain any opportunities. That's right. Right now, the major forces are targeting Yiguchen, not the inner courtyard. Although I, Ting Jingshan, am also an inner courtyard disciple, I don't want to be dragged down by Yiguchen. All you need to do is target Yiguchen. Ting Jingshan spoke in a cold and resolute tone. You, all of you. Ji Ling was so angry that she couldn't vent her anger. She gnashed her teeth and turned her beautiful eyes to Bai Zichen, who had been silent all this time. Right now, only the second in the inner courtyard, Bai Zichen, who possessed an unfathomable cultivation, could turn the situation around. Bai Zichen raised his eyebrows slightly when he sensed Ji Ling's gaze. He pondered for a moment before he finally said, I will do my best to obtain the opportunities in the sword pavilion for the inner courtyard. As for Yiguchen, he can rest outside. The eyes of all the inner courtyard disciples flickered when they heard those words. Are all of you still from the same sect? Mu Xingzu extended her finger and pointed at all the silent inner courtyard disciples. She was so angry that she was about to cry. She felt wronged for Yiguchen. Sigh. Chu Qingqi and Yi Xia also tightly frowned. Yiguchen, do you see that? Even the sect you belong to can't tolerate you. Tell me, what qualifications do you have to make a fool of yourself here? Murong Ditien laughed heartily. He laughed very happily. He had been suppressed by Yiguchin many times before, and he had been holding back his anger for a long time. Now that he could finally release it, his mood was incomparably carefree. Yiguchin's expression didn't change from beginning to end. His gaze swept across the inner courtyard disciples. A portion of the disciples lowered their heads with a trace of shame. There was also a portion of people who were like Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the rest, coldly watching from the sidelines. Ah! Yiguchin lightly shook his head and laughed. He had a cold temperament and wasn't a sociable person to begin with. However, just as Yiguchin's situation was turning bad, an elegant voice rang out. Zither Fairy, do you think that everyone has the opportunity to try the opportunities in the Sword Pavilion? Or do you, Murong Ditian, look down on those with lower cultivation than you? Zither Fairy, who was dressed in pink, stepped out from the Consonance Divine Palace's side as she pursed her lips and smiled. There were many cultivators with first transformation and second transformation amongst the cultivators present. Their gazes carried a trace of hostility when they heard Zither Fairy's words as they looked towards Murong Ditian. You. Murong Ditian's voice was sluggish. Ha, I also think that the opportunities in the Sword Pavilion are for those who are fated to learn about them. Everyone has the opportunity. Chen Yi, who was dressed in green from the Nine Profound Sect's side, stood out and laughed. Everyone can enter my Sword Sect's pagoda forest. To everyone's surprise, Yuan Mia, who had been silent, suddenly stood out and spoke with a cold voice. His gaze wasn't looking at Yiguchin or Murong Ditian, but towards Prince Yuani. Obviously, Yuan Mia was targeting Prince Yuani. At this moment, the originally disadvantageous situation for Yiguchin instantly fell into a subtle state. Zither Fairy, Chen Yi, and the rest's words carried a lot of weight. Even Murong Ditian couldn't say anything. In any case, not a single disciple of my Sword Sect's pagoda forest can be missing. Try it if you have the guts. Ji Ling stepped out and looked at Murong Ditian with her beautiful eyes. At this moment, Murong Ditian, Prince Yuani, and the rest's faces stiffened. Just as the situation was in a deadlock, the defensive array outside the Sword Pavilion gradually weakened and disappeared amidst loud rumbling sounds. The Sword Pavilion has opened. At this moment, no one hesitated anymore. Everyone's gazes were filled with extreme passion as they looked at the Sword Pavilion's door that was slowly opening. Whoosh! 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 Figures rushed into the Sword Pavilion one after another like locusts. Without strength, let's see how you're going to fight for opportunities in the Sword Pavilion. Murong Ditian waved his sleeve and didn't stay in a deadlock any longer. He also flew towards the Sword Pavilion. Let's go, Yiguchin said indifferently. Mu Xingzu and the rest nodded and followed beside Yiguchin. It was as if Yiguchin and the rest were in a small circle, while the rest of the inner court disciples were in another circle. Yiguchin, senior sister hopes that you won't mind this kind of thing, Ji Ling's delicate figure flashed over from the side. She bit her lips slightly and looked at Yiguchin. I have never minded this kind of thing. Yiguchin's gaze was indifferent. Hearing Yiguchin's indifferent tone, Ji Ling could only smile bitterly. But for some reason, Ji Ling had the feeling that these inner court disciples who were watching from the sidelines would soon regret their decision. Chapter 291. As the place where the Void Sword sect collected cultivation methods and swordsmanship in ancient times, the Sword Pavilion naturally had an extraordinary background. As soon as the elites of the seven forces stepped in, they felt a kind of vigorous and dignified pressure of the sword. Under this pressure, some people with weaker cultivations even felt a sense of suffocation. Is that an opportunity? Yiguchin looked around the interior of the Sword Pavilion. This place was completely different from the Sword Technique Pavilion in the Sword Sect Forest of Pagodas. The jade slips that recorded cultivation methods and swordsmanship were not placed on the shelves for people to obtain, but were wrapped in balls of light. Each ball of light was extremely agile and scattered in the air. Without an opportunity or strength, it was difficult to obtain them. Brother Yi, look at those balls of light. The white ones are ordinary Xiantian swordsmanship, while the yellow ones are superb Xiantian swordsmanship, Chu Qingqi said. The Void Sword sect is extremely powerful. How can there only be Xiantian swordsmanship? Yi Guqin frowned slightly. This is the first level of the Sword Pavilion, and the most precious swordsmanship is only superb Xiantian swordsmanship. There is a second level above, which has spiritual level swordsmanship, and a third level has king level swordsmanship. However, it seems that there are some harsh conditions to enter the third level. I'm not quite sure, Chu Qingqi explained. Yi Guqin nodded slightly and said nothing. In the first level of the Sword Pavilion, after sensing the many people who had entered, the originally quiet light clusters suddenly began to move about chaotically. Among the densely packed clusters of light, most of them were white, while the rest were yellow. In the face of these swordsmanship, the heavenly legends of the seven forces were very casual and just grabbed some of them casually. However, there were also some weaker people who worked hard to grab the balls of light. Yi Guqin took a step forward and wanted to grab a white ball of light to have a look. Just as Yi Guqin stretched out his hand, the white ball of light hurriedly avoided Yi Guqin's hand as if it were a snake or a scorpion. This. Even Yi Guqin was confused and somewhat puzzled. His eyes flickered and he took another step forward, trying to grab a white ball of light. But without exception, those white balls of light seemed to be deliberately avoiding Yi Guqin. As a result, the first level of the Sword Pavilion was filled with countless balls of white light. However, not a single ball of light approached Yi Guqin. What's going on? Chu Qingqi and the others looked surprised. As far as they were concerned, even if Yi Guqin didn't have any true energy, he wouldn't be in such a state. When Mu Xingzhu saw this, she tried to grab one of the white balls of light. She easily caught it. This extremely strange scene also fell into the eyes of the others present. Heh! Yi Guqin, didn't I tell you not to come in here? You're just asking for a snub. Your true energy cultivation has been crippled, and even the Xiantian sword technique has been avoided by you. I don't think you're qualified to obtain it. Not far away, Murong Ditian sneered. Then, as if he was showing off, he casually waved his hand, and a few white balls of light were caught in his hand. On the other side, Prince Yuanyi also smiled playfully when he saw this, and casually grabbed many balls of light. Hee, Yi Guqin, where's your pride? Do you want me to give you a ball of light? Pan Shuoyan moved lightly and casually grabbed a white ball of light. She waved it at Yi Guqin, full of mockery. Not only those who had a grudge against Yi Guqin, but even those from the inner yard, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, Ting Jingshan and the others also looked like they were watching a good show. Sigh, I told you to stay outside. Bai Zichen shook his head slightly. Yi Guqin ignored those gazes and frowned. However, no matter where he went, those balls of light escaped as if they couldn't avoid him. No, that's not right. It's not because I'm not qualified to obtain these white balls of light, but because these white balls of light don't approach me. It's as if they're not worthy of me. Yi Guqin suddenly had an idea. He didn't say this because he was arrogant, but because it was the truth. As those balls of light escaped, they were also trembling slightly, as if they knew that they weren't worthy of Yi Guqin. It was as if all the famous swords in the forest of 1,000 swords were trembling after sensing Yi Guqin's sword aura, and were willing to be controlled by Yi Guqin. These balls of light had spirituality. I see. Then it seems that I'm destined to gain nothing on this level. Yi Guqin's eyes flickered, but he wasn't disappointed. The sword techniques on the first level of the Sword Pavilion were at most supreme grade innate sword techniques. With Yi Guqin's current level, there wasn't much point in cultivating such a sword technique. After knowing the reason, Yi Guqin didn't do anything futile. Instead, he stood indifferently and watched the others collect the balls of light. Have you already given up? Murong Ditian and the others looked coldly at Yi Guqin. The other enemies, such as Prince Yuanyi, Ji Yan, and Pan Shuoyan, sneered. Even Wang Xiaotian and the others in the inner court were watching coldly from the side. They felt that Yi Guqin was overestimating himself. Here. Junior brother Yi, take them. Ji Ling walked over and handed a few balls of light, which were supreme-grade innate sword techniques, to Yi Guchen. What's the meaning of this? Yi Guchen was surprised. Since you've entered the sword pavilion, you can't possibly gain nothing, right? Take these. At least you've gained something. When we enter the second level, I'll help you obtain some spiritual sword techniques, said Ji Ling, senior sister. Thank you for your kind intentions, but there's no need for that, smiled Yi Guchen as he waved his hand. You are really a blockhead. What's the point of being angry? Ji Ling gnashed her teeth. She felt that she was doing it for Yi Guchen's good, but Yi Guchen didn't appreciate it. There's really no need for that, said Yi Guchen helplessly. Sigh, all right then. A hint of disappointment appeared in Ji Ling's eyes. She hoped that Yi Guchen would let bygones be bygones and not be estranged from the other disciples. But it was clearly useless against Yi Guchen. For a moment, there were only 2 people in the sword pavilion's first level that didn't make a move. One of them was Yi Guchen, and the other was Xian Hao. Senior brother Xian Hao probably won't even spare a glance at these balls of light, right? That's for sure. Senior brother Xian Hao's goal is to obtain spiritual sword techniques at the very least, or even royal sword techniques at the 3rd level. Why would he be interested in these sword techniques? Tisk tsk. Although both of them didn't make a move, Yi Guchen is completely different from senior brother Xian Hao. I really don't know why he still has the face to stay here. Some of the Limitless Sword Sect's disciples sneered. The Limitless Sword Sect and the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were sworn enemies. Naturally, they wouldn't miss such an opportunity to ridicule Xian Hao. On the other hand, some of the inner yard disciples' faces were burning as if they had been humiliated. The disciples who had been watching coldly from the sidelines looked at Yi Guchen with disdain. This Yi Guchen has really brought shame to our sword sect's talon. He's such a disgrace. He still hasn't left. If it were me, I would have buried my head in the ground in shame. Some of the inner yard disciples said coldly. Ha! Yi Guchen, the reputation that you have created in the sword sect pagoda forest will be completely destroyed at this moment. Wang Xiaotian was very happy. He felt that the resentment that he had been suppressing for a long time had finally been vented. As time passed, a formation that had been silent for a long time at the center of the first level of the sword pavilion finally erupted with divine light again. Along with a faint fluctuation, it seemed as if the space was shaking. It's the entrance to the second level of the sword pavilion. Some people exclaimed and couldn't be bothered to collect the balls of light. The second level was where many spiritual sword techniques were hidden. Its value was far from what the first level could compare to. Sigh. I hope that the balls of light on the second level won't avoid me. I'm actually not picky. Yi Guchen sighed and shook his head with a trace of helplessness. It seemed that sometimes, it was a mistake to have a high level of sword principle. Chapter 292. There were 3 levels in the sword pavilion in the Void Sword Realm. On the first level, the highest level was the Supreme Innate Sword Principle. On the second level, there was the Spiritual Level Sword Principle. For the elites of the 7 superpowers, the Spiritual Level Sword Principle was extremely valuable. As for the King Level Sword Principle, it was the most precious and core inheritance among the 7 superpowers. It was good enough to have a few of them. Therefore, for most of the disciples here, the spiritual level sword principle was their ultimate goal. As for the king level sword principle, even if they were qualified to obtain it, they did not have the comprehension ability to comprehend it. The only way was to hand it over to the sect in exchange for benefits. As the formation in the center of the first level of the sword pavilion surged, it meant that the entrance to the second level had been opened. Enter. At this moment, the elite disciples of the 7 superpowers all rushed toward the formation. Swoosh! A figure flashed and was the first to enter the formation. So fast. That's Xian Hao. Yi Guchen's eyes narrowed as he vaguely caught sight of the figure. The speed that Xianhao had displayed just now could be described as ghostly, causing Yi Guqin to feel a trace of solemnity in his heart. Xianhao's strength was above Chen Yi, Ji Yan, Fang Chen, and the others. After Xianhao, the geniuses of the superpowers, including the elites, also entered in a flash. However, at this moment, there were some warriors below the Divine Soul Realm who were directly blocked by the array. Why? Why can't I enter the second level? Only those above the Divine Soul Realm can enter the second level of the Sword Pavilion. The rest of you, give up, someone who had entered the Sword Pavilion said. This made the group of warriors change their expressions. Even Mu Xingzu bit her lip. Her cultivation had not reached the Divine Soul Realm. Senior brother Yi, it seems that Xingzhu can't enter the second level. Mu Xingzu stopped. Although there was a trace of unwillingness in her words, there was no other way. Xingzhu, don't give up. Yi Guqin smiled faintly and grabbed Mu Xingzu with one hand. There seemed to be sword light flashing in his eyes as he rushed towards the formation. Feeling her little hand wrapped in Yi Guqin's gentle hand, Mu Xingzu's heart relaxed for no reason. It seemed that as long as Yi Guqin was here, all difficulties were no longer difficult. Ha! Yi Guqin, the reason why I didn't enter directly was because I wanted to see how you would embarrass yourself here. Murong Ditian stood at the side of the formation as he sneered. Xianing was beside him. Even Ji Yan and Pan Shuoyan of the Rhino Divine Palace were still there. Pan Shuoyan looked at Mu Xingzu with extreme disgust in her eyes. She was very narrow-minded. Mu Xingzu had obtained the blue crystal pendant, which made Pan Shuoyan extremely unhappy. She also bore a grudge against Yi Guqin. Ha! Lowly girl, is Yi Guqin your backing? He has no vital energy, and his cultivation is not even as good as yours. How could he enter the second level? Pan Shuoyan crossed her arms in front of her chest, supporting her pair of big breasts, and mocked her mercilessly. Yi Guqin, don't force yourself. Ji Ling sighed when he saw this. Since you are willing to wait, then wait here. Yi Guqin glanced at Murong Ditian and the others with an indifferent gaze. Then, he pulled Mu Xingzu's hand and entered the formation. The moment they entered, Yi Guqin emitted a trace of sword heart illumination. Then, Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu disappeared from the formation. What's going on? Where did they go? Were they expelled? Could it be that they were sent out of the Sword Pavilion? At this moment, everyone who was still in the first level of the Sword Pavilion had dumbfounded expressions. You looked at me, and I looked at you. There was confusion in their eyes. This. Even Murong Ditian's expression stiffened. Then, his expression changed slightly and he said as if he was comforting them, perhaps they have already been sent out. But at this moment, a ball of light appeared above the formation. Then, an image appeared in the air. It was the image of the second level of the Sword Pavilion. That's right. Every time the Sword Pavilion opens, there will be an image like this. Some experienced cultivators said. However, when Murong Ditian's gaze swept past the scene, his gaze was completely frozen. Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu appeared in the second level of the Sword Pavilion. How is this possible? Murong Ditian didn't believe it and his expression changed. He stepped into the magic array and was teleported to the second level. I don't believe it. I also don't believe it. The two of them have yet to break through to the Divine Soul Realm. That Yi Guqin doesn't have any true qi. How is it possible for him to enter the second level? Pan Shuoyan also let out a high-pitched scream. Her face was filled with disbelief as she stepped into the formation. Then, the expressions of those who wanted to watch the show changed. They hurriedly entered the formation and could no longer maintain the calmness they had when they were watching the show. Could it be that Yi Guqin is able to create a miracle here? Ji Ling opened her mouth in disbelief. As the figures flashed, other than the cultivators below the Divine Soul Realm, the rest of the people entered the formation and arrived at the second level. However, no matter if it was Murong Ditian, Pan Shuoyan, Ji Yan, or even Prince Yuani, they all felt as if they were in a dream as they looked at the black-robed young man standing on the second level. Yi Guchen, how is this possible? You. At this moment, Murong Ditian was at a loss for words, as if he couldn't say anything. Originally, they wanted to see Yi Guchen make a fool of himself. However, from the looks of it, they, who were standing at the side of the formation and waiting, were the ones who looked like a joke. So what if you entered the second level? Can you obtain the light balls of sword techniques? Although Xianing was also in disbelief, he still clenched his teeth and said. When he said that, many people who were hostile towards Yi Guchen seemed to have found a way to vent their anger as they hurriedly agreed with him. That's right. So what if Yi Guchen entered the second level? He couldn't even obtain a single white ball of light on the first level. Could it be that he can obtain one on the second level? That's right. At the very least, the light balls on the second level contain spirit-grade sword techniques. It's even harder to obtain them than the first level. Yi Guchen definitely won't obtain anything. At this moment, everyone who was hostile towards Yi Guchen, including Wang Xiaotian and the others in the inner court, were certain that even if Yi Guchen entered the second level, he wouldn't obtain anything. Senior brother Yi. At the side, Mu Xingzu's hand was still held by Yi Guchen. There was also a trace of worry in her eyes. Xingzhu, among the spirit-grade sword techniques on the second level, which one are you interested in? Yi Guchen's eyes were filled with an indescribable emotion as the corner of his mouth carried a faint smile. Senior brother. Mu Xingzu's eyes lit up slightly. She extended her slender finger and pointed at a crimson ball of light among the light balls that filled the sky. Ha! Lowly girl, that crimson ball of light represents a supreme spirit-grade sword technique. Even an ordinary genius might not be able to obtain it. Do you think Yi Guchen has the ability to do so? The conversation between Yi Guchen and Mu Xingzu was also heard by others. When Pan Shuoyan heard it, the corner of her mouth lifted into a sneer as she spoke in a strange tone. Alright, I'll give you whatever sword technique you want. Yi Guchen nodded slightly and did not say anything. In the next moment, Yi Guchen suddenly stomped his feet on the ground. Boom! With a loud bang, Yi Guchen also emitted a mysterious sword essence. As soon as the sword essence was released, all the light balls on the second level of the sword pavilion froze for a moment before completely boiling. Those light balls that were dancing in mid-air seemed to have been injected with chicken blood as they instantly exploded. Then, all the light balls on the ground seemed to have gone crazy as they gathered towards Yi Guchen. That ferocity was as if they were fighting for Yi Guchen to obtain them. This scene completely shocked everyone present. Chapter 293. Murong Ditian's expression was lifeless and at a loss. He claimed to be the pride of the sword and had a rare talent in the sword Dao. Even so, it wasn't easy for him to obtain a sword technique on the second level of the sword pavilion, especially a supreme spiritual sword technique. However, at this moment, on the second level of the sword pavilion, when Yi Guchen exuded that mysterious aura, all the light balls seemed to boil and gathered toward Yi Guchen. No, impossible, this concept is heart integrated into sword. Murong Ditian shook his head. He couldn't believe it and didn't want to believe it. Sword cultivators who could comprehend heart integrated into sword were even rarer than sword cultivators who comprehended ordinary sword intents. Heart integrated into sword meant that one had a very deep understanding of the sword Dao to be able to comprehend it. Yi Guchen only comprehended heart integrated into sword completely after entering Lotus Village's sword heart spring. Therefore, Murong Ditian only knew that Yi Guchen possessed heart integrated into sword until now. Although not everyone possessed the enlightened sword heart, the majority of the people knew about it. Therefore, when Yi Guchen spread out this concept, it caused a series of shock and astonishment. This. Pan Shuoyan opened her red mouth and didn't know what kind of expression to show. That bitter and unkind mocking expression still remained on her face, making her look rather comical. Prince Yuani's expression was also frozen. He seemed to have recalled the fear of being suppressed by Yi Guchen's strength in the infinite plains. Not only these people, but Wang Xiaotian and the rest of the inner yard disciples also felt as if they were in a dream. They couldn't believe everything that was happening before their eyes. Who would have believed that a person who had lost all his true qi could actually attract all the light balls and even grab a large number of them casually? This Yi Guqin can actually attract so many light balls. The inner yard disciples who were watching coldly from the sidelines were now looking at the surging light balls in a daze. Their eyes were red and they were panting heavily. That wasn't a Xiantian sword art, but a spiritual sword art. Even among the 7 big forces, it wasn't something that could be obtained easily. Yi Guqin stood there calmly, not taking the initiative to grab the ball of light. However, those balls of light were like a school of fish, revolving around Yi Guqin. Here, Xingzhu. This is what you wanted. Yi Guqin casually waved his hand, and the crimson ball of light that Mu Xingzhu had her eyes on obediently fell into Yi Guqin's hand like a pet. Thank you, senior brother Yi. Mu Xingzhu's eyes widened, and there was an unconcealable joy in her eyes. The young man she admired always seemed to be able to create miracles that no one else could. Brother Chu, I see that you've been staring at this ball of light for a long time. Yi Guqin waved his hand again, and another ball of light landed in front of Chu Qingqi. This. Chu Qingqi hesitated for a moment, a trace of passion in his eyes, but he didn't argue and directly accepted it. Come, Yi Xia, this is for you. Seeing Yi Guqin casually give away precious balls of light, the expressions of Murong Ditian and the others were as if they had eaten a dead fly. Pan Shuoyan couldn't endure it any longer. She stared at the crimson ball of light floating in the air and directly reached out with her hand, wanting to snatch it. Yi Guqin glanced at it and faintly smiled. He gently waved his hand, and the ball of light directly flew towards Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin. Pan Shuoyan was furious. Her snow-white face was filled with extreme anger, and her ample chest was heaving up and down. She was clearly quite angry. It wasn't just Pan Shuoyan. Murong Ditian, Prince Yuani, and the others all wanted to snatch the balls of light, but they were all dispersed by Yi Guqin with a casual wave of his hand, and those balls of light all landed beside him. Yi Guqin, you're cheating. Cheating? I can't accept this. Won't the sword pavilion's opportunity be snatched away by Yi Guqin alone? This isn't fair at all. At this moment, Yi Guqin's enemies were all sullen in their hearts. This feeling was like having a treasure mountain in front of them, only to discover that the treasure mountain already had an owner, and they couldn't even obtain a single strand of hair. Unfair. Ha, who was the one who thought that they could monopolize the opportunity outside the sword pavilion? You've already thrown fairness to the back of your minds, so why should I care? Yi Guqin said indifferently with his hands behind his back. That's right. Yi Guqin is an inner court disciple. No one can touch him. Bai Zichen, who didn't obtain anything, took a step forward and spoke in a righteous tone. Yi Guqin raised his brows and looked at Bai Zichen. Bai Zichen didn't have such an attitude outside the sword pavilion. Damn it. Murong Ditian and the others had cold expressions when they saw Bai Zichen and the others step forward. They couldn't casually deal with Yi Guqin anymore. Zither Fairy, I saw that you were looking at this clump of light. Yi Guqin caught a glimpse of Zither Fairy's beautiful eyes and immediately sent a ball of light towards her. Thank you, young Master Yi. Zither Fairy was pleasantly surprised. She was indeed compatible with this clump of light. Pan Shuoyan's face turned fiendish when she saw this. She gnashed her teeth and was so angry that her body trembled. Bai Yanji, this seems to be to your liking. Brother Chini, we haven't known each other for long, so I'll give this to you as a gift. Yi Guqin casually waved his hand. Those who were friends with Yi Guqin or those who had good karma with him all received the clumps of light they wanted. They looked at Yi Guqin with either joy or gratitude. The scene of Yi Guqin casually giving out clumps of light was also seen by everyone in the inner courtyard. Every time he gave out a clump of light, the hearts of the inner courtyard disciples would tremble. Only Yi Guqin would give away these precious spiritual level swordsmanship as if they were cabbages. Not to mention Li Lingxiao, Ting Jingshan, and the others, even Bai Zichen had a trace of passion hidden in his eyes. Yi Guchen, give some clumps of light to the disciples of the inner courtyard. Bai Zichen could no longer remain indifferent as he spoke with a righteous tone. He didn't want Yi Guchen to give the clumps of light to him alone, but to all the disciples of the inner courtyard. That's right. Yi Guchen, as an inner courtyard disciple, you should help our sect. That's right. Jianzong Yi, since you have the ability, then contribute it. We will also be grateful to you. Those disciples who were watching by the side spoke out. Even Wang Xiaotian, who had a grudge with Yi Guchen, kept his mouth shut at this moment. After all, with the benefits before them, no one wanted to offend Yi Guchen at this moment. You guys previously agreed with Murong Ditian and didn't allow senior brother Yi to enter the sword pavilion. You guys think that senior brother Yi doesn't have the ability to obtain the opportunity, but you guys actually have the face to say such words. A look of disdain appeared on Mu Xingzhu's face. When Ji Ling saw this, she let out a soft sigh and revealed a bitter smile. She was still planning to give some clumps of light to Yi Guchen as compensation. But looking at it now, even Ji Ling felt that her thoughts were laughable. Yi Guchen should have already known, right? That's why he's so calm. This person is truly a monster. Even Ji Ling, who had an extraordinary cultivation, could only sigh at this moment. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered as he faced the crimson eyes of the inner court disciples. With a faint smile, he said, "All right, sure. Brother Yi." Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the others wanted to say something, but hesitated. Ha! This is Sword Sect Master Yi. You're really magnanimous, laughed some inner court disciples. Yi Guchen waved his hand and a portion of the clumps of light landed in the hands of some inner court disciples. But it wasn't all of the inner court disciples, but the inner court disciples who were ashamed outside the sword pavilion. Senior brother Yi. Those disciples wanted to say something, but hesitated. Their faces were flushed red. Senior brother Yi, we're ashamed to accept it, sighed a disciple. You guys take it. Yi Guchen waved his hand and didn't mind it. Those inner court disciples revealed grateful expressions. Clearly, in their eyes, Yi Guchen's figure was much taller than Bai Zichen and the others, and they respected him even more. Senior brother Yi, what about us? Sword Sect Master Yi, you can't be so unfair, right? Those disciples who were watching coldly from the sidelines, including Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, Ting Jingshan, and the others, didn't receive any clumps of light. Yi Guchen, what's the meaning of this? Are you trying to cause internal strife? Bai Zichen frowned slightly and reprimanded. Yi Guchen didn't pay any attention to him. Not only that, but those inner court disciples who were indebted to Yi Guchen also looked coldly at Bai Zichen and gathered around Yi Guchen. They didn't want to be in the same group as Bai Zichen and the others. You. Bai Zichen's face was ashen. Chapter 294. Bai Zichen knew that he had an extremely high reputation in the sword sect forest of pagodas. After the incident at the single sword cliff, Bai Zichen had received even more respect from all the inner court disciples. However, at this moment, he was unable to back down and his expression was stiff. Not only him, but Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others were also incomparably envious when they saw the clumps of light revolving around Yi Guchen and wished that they could immediately go up and fight for them. However, they also knew that with Yi Guchen around, it would be very difficult for them to obtain the clumps of light. This caused the inner court disciples, including Bai Zichen, to feel incomparably sullen and uncomfortable in their hearts. Especially those disciples who had spoken sarcastically earlier, all of them wished that they could give themselves a big slap in the face. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have said so much nonsense. Damn it, my mouth is really cheap. This group of inner court disciples was filled with regret, and there were even some who had concealed coldness in their eyes as they looked at Wang Xiaotian and the others. If it wasn't for Wang Xiaotian and the others taking the lead, these disciples wouldn't have followed suit. Looking at those clown-like inner court disciples, Yiguchen shook his head slightly and ignored them. At this moment, practically all the clumps of light in the entire second level of the sword pavilion were revolving around Yiguchen, causing the current Yiguchen to look rather imposing and unfathomable. Yiguchen, don't be too pleased with yourself. Murong Ditian nearly shattered his teeth as he turned to look at Xianhao with a steely face and cupped his hands. Senior brother Xianhao, please make your move. With Murong Ditian's pride, he wasn't willing to submit to anyone. However, in this current situation, the only one who could suppress Yiguchen was Xianhao. Xianhao's black and white hair fluttered without wind. He was the first to enter the second level. However, he still didn't make any move and didn't have any intention of making a move to grab the clumps of light. To Xianhao, spiritual sword techniques were still nothing to him. Senior brother Xianhao, that Yiguchen is too arrogant. Please make your move. Murong Ditian forcefully suppressed the unwillingness in his heart and begged. That's right. Senior brother Xianhao, please make your move. Xianing also cupped his fists together. The group of Limitless Sword sect disciples all shouted in unison, not wanting Yiguchen to monopolize the limelight. Xianhao's gaze was indifferent. He glanced at Yiguchen and said indifferently, Yiguchen, you have indeed exceeded my expectations. Yiguchen's brows furrowed slightly. Facing Xianhao, he felt tremendous pressure. Although I'm not interested in the second level spiritual sword technique, it's not good for you to monopolize it. As soon as Xianhao finished speaking, he also stomped on the ground with one foot. Then, a wave of profound sword concept spread out. Along with the release of this concept, the white and black swords on his back seemed to vibrate as well, as if they had sensed something. This is... After Xianhao emitted that concept, everyone present felt a profound and unfathomable pressure. Some of the weaker cultivators even felt like they were suffocating. That's... Yiguchen's face froze slightly. What Xianhao emitted was not the heart integrated into sword essence. It was sword essence. However, that sword essence was extremely vague in Yiguchen's perception, and it did not feel like the void sword essence. Unformed sword essence. Yiguchen suddenly understood. The reason why Yiguchen felt that the sword essence was very vague was that Xianhao's sword essence had not yet formed. Xianhao has already inherited the peerless void sword essence. With this vague sword essence, doesn't it mean that he has two sword essences? No wonder he has such a great reputation. Yiguchen finally knew how powerful Xianhao was. As the top genius of the Limitless Sword Sect's Sun Moon Hall, Xianhao's strength was indeed worthy of his reputation to be able to leave his name on the sword-seeking steel. As Xianhao's sword essence was emitted, some of the dancing light balls were also drawn to it. Yiguchen's eyes flashed, and the heart integrated into sword essence became more intense. Then, he directly put most of the light balls into his origin ring. Xianhao only got a small part. However, he did not care and casually threw these light balls to the group of people from the Limitless Sword sect. What about us, Master Xianhao? Pan Shuoyan's expression was unnatural. She slowly swayed her waist and walked forward, trying to lift her large breasts with a flattering smile on her face. Xianhao's eyes were indifferent. He did not even look at Pan Shuoyan, and closed his eyes to rest. Pan Shuoyan's smile froze on her face. Not only her, but Ji Yan, Prince Yuanyi, and the others also looked extremely uncomfortable. They had gained nothing on the second level of the sword pavilion. They came empty-handed and left empty-handed. Yiguchen. Prince Yuanyi's veins were bulging on his forehead, and his fists were tightly clenched. Your Highness, don't be impatient. Cast a long line to catch a big fish, the young Marquis Fang Chen said in a low voice, his eyes surging with a cold luster. That's right. So what if Yiguchen got an opportunity? I'll make him spit it all out sooner or later. Prince Yuanyi suppressed the grievance and anger in his heart and took a deep breath. As Yiguchen and Xianhao divided all the light balls on the second level of the sword pavilion, the remaining cultivators' expressions kept changing. They all looked at Yi Guqin like hungry wolves looking at a piece of fat meat. However, there were also many people on Yi Guqin's side. Chen Yi, Zither Fairy, Bai Yanji, and the others were all close to Yi Guqin. It was because of this that the atmosphere on the second level of the sword pavilion fell into a frozen stifling atmosphere. At this moment, the formation in the center of the second level was activated again. As the light surged, the formation that led to the third level was activated. It's the entrance to the third level of the sword pavilion. Everyone's gazes landed on the array. If the spiritual level sword technique on the second level of the sword pavilion was worth fighting for, then the king level sword technique on the third level of the sword pavilion was enough to make people go crazy. As soon as the formation was activated, Xian Hao, who had been indifferent and casual, suddenly had a bright flash in his eyes. I've been waiting for this moment. Xian Hao's eyes were extremely bright. Xian Hao had obtained the void sword technique on the second level of the sword pavilion. But at the same time, Xian Hao sensed through the void sword technique that there was an extremely powerful king-level sword technique on the third level of the sword pavilion that was closely related to the void sword technique. It was because of this that Xian Hao came to the void sword realm again. He came for two purposes. The first was naturally the place of heavenly thunder that Xian Mo had mentioned. The second was the king-level sword technique on the third level of the sword pavilion that was related to the void sword technique. That king-level sword technique is related to the void sword technique. If combined with my void sword essence, I have a chance of winning even against Yan Wushuang, Gu Zun, and the others. Xian Hao took a step forward. Just as he was about to step into the formation, he was stopped by a ray of divine light and was directly blasted back. Even Xian Hao was stopped. Many disciples widened their eyes when they saw this scene. Yi Guqin's eyes flickered. Chu Qingqi had previously said that there seemed to be some harsh conditions to enter the third level of the sword pavilion. But so far, none of the geniuses from the 7 major forces had been able to enter the third level. Oh, is that so? Xian Hao's eyes were inexplicable, and then a mysterious sword essence erupted again. This sword essence was not the vague sword essence from before, but the peerless sword essence of the void. As the sword essence of the void spread out, everyone felt as if there were countless transparent sword chi flowing in the void, shuttling back and forth. The sharp edge was shocking. Is this the sword essence of the void? Yi Guqin's eyes were also extremely dignified. Xian Hao was supported by the sword essence of the void. He took a step forward and directly stepped into the formation in front of everyone's shocked eyes. He went in. Senior brother Xian Hao has entered the third level. Many people from the Limitless Sword sect exclaimed. Xingzhu, you guys stay here. Yi Guqin said in a deep voice. Even with Yi Guqin's talent and strength, he could not bring anyone up to the third level. His eyes flickered, and he made a judgment in his heart. Does the condition to enter the third level of the sword pavilion require a peerless sword essence? Such a condition is indeed harsh. Yi Guqin's lips curved into a smile. Even in the ancient void sword sect, few people could possess a peerless sword essence. The next moment, Yi Guqin also took a step forward, wanting to enter the third level. Yi Guqin, he actually wants to enter the third level? Let's wait and see. I don't believe that Yi Guqin can enter again. Murong Ditian, Prince Yuanyi, Pan Shuoyan, and the others stared at Yi Guqin's back. On this side, Bai Zichen, Ji Ling, Wang Xiaotian, and the others also did not blink. Looking at those complicated gazes, Yi Guqin's state of mind was incomparably calm. In an instant, Yi Guqin's eyes were swallowed by the color of blood. A horrifying and terrifying aura also erupted like a volcano, erupting and shaking the entire second level of the sword pavilion. Shura sword essence, erupting. Chapter 295. Is that the Azura sword intent? Feeling the terrifying sword intent that exploded from Yi Guqin. Even without the support of true qi, just the aura that was emitted was enough to make people terrified. Some people with weaker cultivations even retreated continuously as they were suffocated by the powerful aura. Yi Guqin. Murong Ditian stared at Yi Guqin with jealousy. As a genius of the sword principle, his only regret was that he had not comprehended sword intent. In his eyes, Yi Guqin, whom he had always looked down on, had comprehended dual sword intent. How could Murong Ditian not be jealous? After activating the Azura sword intent, Yi Guqin's feet flashed as he directly entered the formation. After a flash of light, Yi Guqin appeared on the third level of the sword pavilion. After Yi Guqin went up, a group of people, including Murong Ditian, also wanted to enter. However, in this place, other than Xian Hao and Yi Guqin, the others did not have exceptional sword intent. Even the dark sword intent of the Origin Annihilation was only of an ordinary grade and could not enter the third level. After that, the image of the third level appeared on the formation. In the entire mysterious third level of the sword pavilion, only Xian Hao and Yi Guqin had entered it. At this moment, Yi Guqin looked over. The third level of the sword pavilion was simple and old, and the ground was covered in dust. It was obvious that it had been silent for many years. Yi Guqin and Xian Hao were separated by some distance as they looked at the center of the sword pavilion at the same time. Compared to the light balls on the first and second level of the sword pavilion, the light balls on the third level were pitifully few. There were only 5 of them. Among the 5 light balls, 4 of them were golden, and 1 of them was dark golden. However, no matter which light ball it was, the waves that it emitted were far more powerful than the light balls on the first and second level. King-level sword technique. At this moment, Yi Guqin and Xian Hao both had the same thought. When faced with a sword technique of this level, even Xian Hao was unable to maintain his usual indifference. That's the one. Xian Hao's gaze locked onto the dark golden ball of light among the 5 balls of light. Xian Hao cultivated the Sword of the Void and naturally sensed that the dark golden light was connected to the Sword of the Void. But coincidentally, Yi Guqin also obtained the Void Sword technique because of Xianing. Not only that, but he had also cultivated the Void Sword technique to the realm of perfection. Therefore, at this moment, Yi Guqin's gaze unconsciously shifted to the dark golden ball of light. The fluctuation of this dark golden light was not only stronger than that of the other 4 golden light balls, but it also gave Yi Guqin a sense of familiarity with it. Does it have anything to do with the Void Sword technique? Yi Guqin was quite sensitive to swords, so he naturally perceived this fluctuation at this moment. Attack! Yi Guqin and Xian Hao flashed towards the dark golden ball of light at almost the same time. This scene was also transmitted to the eyes of everyone on the second floor through the images on the formation. What? Yi Guqin actually dares to snatch the opportunity from Xian Hao. He is overestimating himself. Not to mention that his genuine qi is crippled. Even if he is at his peak, it would be difficult for him to compete with Xian Hao. Seeing that Yi Guqin was snatching the opportunity from Xian Hao, the second floor of the sword pavilion was in an uproar. Especially the disciples of the Limitless Sword sect, they sneered with disdain. Murong Ditian's gloomy face also recovered a little, and he was watching the show coldly. However, among the people who had a grudge against Yi Guqin, Ji Yan and Pan Shuoyan did not mock him. Because they knew that Yi Guqin had an extremely powerful puppet. Although the puppet is strong, it shouldn't be able to stop Xian Hao, right? Pan Shuoyan pondered. Although the blood cloud puppet could force Pan Shuoyan to retreat, in Pan Shuoyan's opinion, Xian Hao was much stronger than her. No matter how strong the blood cloud puppet was, it would be difficult for it to compete with Xian Hao. On the other side, Mu Xingzu and the others also clenched their fists and stared nervously at Yi Guqin's figure on the screen. Third floor of the sword pavilion. Seeing that Yi Guqin was also taking action, Xian Hao's face revealed a tinge of surprise. Yi Guqin, are you sure you want to take action? Xian Hao said faintly. In his opinion, as long as Yan Wushuang, Gu Zun, the young war emperor and the others did not come, there was almost no one who could stop him from obtaining the opportunity in the Void Sword realm. As for Yi Guqin, aside from the Sword Heart Illumination and the Azura Sword, there was nothing else that Xian Hao cared about. Therefore, Xian Hao also subconsciously thought that even if Yiguchen entered the third floor, he would only stand there and not dare to snatch the opportunity from him. The opportunity belongs to the fated one. Yiguchen stretched out his hand and was about to grab the dark golden ball of light. Fool! Xian Hao's eyes flashed coldly. No one dared to snatch away what he wanted. In the next moment, Xian Hao slightly raised his hand and did not even bother to draw his sword. He used his finger as a sword and the peerless void sword essence spread out. Then, he pointed his finger and a translucent sword wave instantly pierced through the void and directly flashed towards Yiguchen's chest. This casual flick of his finger was enough to kill an expert in the fifth transformation Divine Soul realm. Feeling the sharp finger radiance, Yiguchen's face changed slightly. Xian Hao was indeed a top genius. His battle strength was not on the same level as the young Flame Emperor and the others. Only Yiguchen, who had made a breakthrough, was qualified to compete with him. Swoosh! A blood shadow flashed out of Yiguchen's origin ring. It was the blood cloud centipede. Dong! Xian Hao's finger radiance fell on the blood cloud centipede and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The blood cloud centipede took 2 steps back. Yiguchen took the opportunity to grab the dark golden ball of light and put it into his origin ring. Seeing this, Xian Hao's originally indifferent expression changed instantly, as if his reverse scale had been touched. No one can take away what I want. Xian Hao's feet flashed and an unparalleled sword aura exploded from the void. It actually surrounded Yiguchen from all directions. Yiguchen commanded the blood cloud centipede to attack Xian Hao. At the same time, he used the wave-like subtle steps. Although he lost the support of his true chi and was a little slower, he was still able to deal with it. Just as Yiguchen snatched the dark golden ball of light, the formation in the middle of the third level suddenly bloomed with light. As the entire sword pavilion trembled, rays of light rose into the sky from outside the sword pavilion. Immediately, everyone in the sword pavilion, including Yiguchen and Xian Hao on the third level, were directly sent to the valley outside the sword pavilion. The entire sword pavilion was sealed by the defensive formation again. All of a sudden, many figures appeared outside the valley, including Yiguchen's figure. Bang! On the other side, the blood cloud centipede collided with Xian Hao's attack and then dispersed. For a moment, the entire valley fell into a suffocating silence. Xian Hao stared at Yiguchen. Although there was no look of anger on his face, all the disciples of the Limitless Sword sect knew that the angrier Xian Hao was, the quieter he was. Yiguchen is going to be unlucky. Some people, including Pan Shuoyan, looked at Yiguchen gloatingly. Although Yiguchen had the blood cloud centipede as his trump card, Xian Hao was definitely not easy to deal with. The entire valley was filled with a strong smell of gunpowder. Xian Hao took a step forward. His tone was very calm, but his eyes were bottomless. Yiguchen, I'll give you one more chance. Hand over the ball of light, and I can let you live. This was Xian Hao's ultimatum. However, I'm sorry, but this Ye's path has always been one that I walk myself, and not one that others give me charity. Yiguchen's expression was indifferent and did not leave any leeway. Then, I'll make your way to a dead end. Xian Hao did not say anything else. His aura completely erupted. Chapter 296. The 9 transformations of the Divine Soul Realm was the highest realm among all the elites. Following the complete eruption of Xian Hao's aura, that powerful aura swept out like a tornado. As expected of Xian Hao, this aura spread out like a storm. Not to mention the weaker disciples, even Chen Yi, Ji Yan, Fang Chen, and the other geniuses felt their chests tighten. It was very stifling. The pressure that Xian Hao brought to the others was too great. Yiguchen, don't think that you can do whatever you want with a puppet. No one can stop me from killing you. Xian Hao took a step forward and disappeared instantly. How is that possible? Where did Xian Hao go? Everyone's expressions changed when they saw Xian Hao suddenly disappear. Such a strange and unfathomable technique caused everyone to be afraid. Swoosh! Yiguchen's eyes flashed and a vigorous soul power spread out. The soul power was no weaker than a divine soul realm expert who had condensed a sea of consciousness. Retreat! Yiguchen's soul power suddenly sensed something and he quickly retreated. In the next moment, a sword finger pointed out from the void and revealed Xianhao's figure. Is that teleportation? Some people were shocked when they saw Xianhao's strange figure appear. This kind of speed, this kind of method, was simply unfathomable. Is it the sword essence of the void that gave him the ability? Yiguchen's eyes flashed. Others might not know, but Yiguchen knew. For example, the Azura sword essence gave him the ability to use the Eye of Azura. Xianhao's extreme speed that was almost like traversing the void was obviously an ability given to him by the sword essence of the void. As expected of a peerless sword essence. Yiguchen frowned. Even he felt that it was very troublesome. On the other side, Xianhao was surprised. Obviously, he did not expect Yiguchen, who had not broken through to the divine soul realm, to have such a vigorous and sharp soul power that could sense his movement. So what? You will always be in a passive position. Xianhao attacked again. His feet flashed and his figure suddenly disappeared. Blood Cloud Mantis. Yiguchen growled. The Blood Cloud Centipede stomped on the ground and instantly returned to Yiguchen's side. Right at that moment, Xianhao's figure appeared once more. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. Instead, he was holding a pitch-black sword. It was one of the two swords on his back. Senior brother Xianhao has taken out the Profoundine sword. Many disciples of the Limitless Sword sect exclaimed. It was no wonder that they were so astonished. With Xianhao's abilities and status, he rarely used the sword on his back. It was because there were not many people of the same generation who were qualified for him to use his mystical rune divine weapon. Rain God Sword Technique, Sorrowful Rain. Xianhao held the Dark Yin sword and activated the spirit pattern array on the sword. In an instant, the surrounding heaven and earth seemed to become gloomy and cold. The air was damp and filled with water vapor. Yiguchen's eyes narrowed. The water vapor was not real water vapor, but sword energy. Countless sword chi condensed like rain. With the support of the Profoundine sword's ability, it was like a sorrowful rain of swords. Crash! Every drop of rain was a beam of sword chi. With a flip of his hand, Yiguchen summoned the soft sword of Fallen Star. Once the sword momentum was unleashed, it was as explosive as fire, resisting the sword rain that filled the sky. At the same time, the Blood Cloud Centipede stood in front of Yiguchen to protect him. It punched out and the air screamed as it resisted the sword rain. Clang! 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 Countless sword rain fell on the Blood Cloud Centipede's body and instantly, there was a dense sound of metal clashing. However, the Blood Cloud Centipede was a puppet and such attacks were useless against it. There were only many dents on its body. At the same time, Yiguchen also used the fledgling form of the fire sword essence to resist the remaining sword rain. Although he couldn't use his genuine chi, Yiguchen could use the power of the vermilion bird totem. His sword momentum spread out like a raging fire and clashed with Xianhao's sword momentum. Sword chi burst out continuously. Yiguchen also retreated continuously. If not for his perfect physical body and the invincible Vajra body, Yiguchen would not be able to resist Xianhao even if he used the fledgling form of the fire sword essence. This is... Xianhao's expression changed slightly for the first time. He knew that Yiguchen had two sword essences. However, although the sword essence that Yiguchen displayed was only in its fledgling form, it was not any of the sword essences that Yiguchen had previously possessed. Could he have comprehended a new sword essence? Even Xianhao's expression changed slightly when he thought of this. If it were an ordinary sword cultivator, it would be extremely difficult to comprehend even an ordinary sword essence. Even someone as talented as Xianhao had only obtained the void sword essence by chance. As for the other sword essence, he had been comprehending it since he was young but had not completely comprehended it until now. How can this Yiguchin, killing intent flashed in Xianhao's eyes. He was arrogant and didn't think that anyone could surpass him. He was confident even when facing Yan Wushuang, Gu Zun, and the others. However, he was now a little wary of Yiguchin. Kill! Without saying anything, Xianhao attacked again. His sword was like rain, and with the support of the Dark Yin sword, it was even more powerful. Boom! 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 The blood cloud puppet attacked and collided with Xianhao's sword, causing a loud explosion and shockwaves to spread out. The rest of the people in the surroundings were all trembling with fear. For example, Murong Ditian and the others had solemn expressions. Although they wanted to surround and kill Yiguchin, Ji Ling, Zither Fairy, Qin Yi, and the others were on the other side. Therefore, a delicate balance was maintained. No one dared to attack casually. Ha! Yiguchin won't be able to hold on sooner or later. He wants to fight senior brother Xianhao with just a puppet? The spectators could see that Yiguchin's situation wasn't good. He was coughing up blood from Xianhao's attacks. Even with the help of the blood cloud puppet, his injuries were getting worse. Senior brother Yi, on the other side, Mu Xingzu and the others were extremely worried. However, because of Murong Ditian and the others, they couldn't help either. On the battlefield, Yiguchin's expression didn't change. He was thinking of a solution. With the current strength of the demonic cloud blood crystal, it won't be able to hold on for long if I use the life and death chamber. With Xianhao's identity, the limitless sword sect will definitely give him a life-saving item. At that time, if the blood cloud puppet can't kill him and loses its energy source, I won't be in a good situation. Even in such a life and death situation, Yiguchin was still thinking and analyzing calmly. Although his injuries were getting worse, he had the recovery ability of his perfect physical body. Therefore, he wasn't in any danger for the time being. Just as Yiguchin was thinking of a way to break out of this situation, there was a huge commotion in a region not far from the sword pavilion. That region flickered with brilliance and a fragrance filled the sky. That kind of abnormality couldn't be concealed. That place is the Pill Hall. The Pill Hall has opened. Let's go. There's a great opportunity in that place. We can get supreme grade elixirs. I heard that there might be quasi-sage elixirs in there. Sensing the huge commotion in that region, everyone outside the sword pavilion couldn't stay calm anymore. Even Murong Ditian, Pan Shuoyan and the others were breathing rapidly. They didn't get anything in the sword pavilion. It was like drawing water with a bamboo basket. However, in the Pill Hall, everyone had a fair chance to get an opportunity. Let's go. At this moment, no one hesitated anymore. They couldn't care less about the battle between Yiguchin and Xianhao. Instead, they flew towards the Pill Hall. Chapter 297. The Pill Hall was a famous place of opportunity in the Void Sword realm. Many people had obtained opportunities there. Compared to the Sword Pavilion, the opportunities in the Pill Hall were easier to obtain. The Pill Hall wasn't far away from the Sword Pavilion. Hence, everyone outside the valley was heading towards the Pill Hall. Yiguchin and Xianhao, who were fighting, had obviously sensed the changes in the Pill Hall. Xianhao's eyes flickered slightly. Xianhao was also slightly interested in the opportunities in the Pill Hall. After all, elixirs were extremely important resources for martial artists. Even with Xianhao's status and strength, the limitless sword sect wouldn't give him all the resources. No one would complain about having too many elixirs. Xianhao, are you still going to fight with me here? Although I might not be able to defeat you now, you won't be able to do anything to me for the time being. Yiguchin's eyes flickered as he continued to say. Or are you saying that the opportunities in the Pill Hall are useless to you? Yiguchin's expression was calm. Although he had suffered some injuries, he had strong blood qi and recovery ability. Hence, he didn't show any signs of weakness. Xianhao stopped his sword and looked deeply at Yiguchen. His expression was also calm. He didn't get angry because of Yiguchen's words. Based on this point alone, Xianhao's temperament had far surpassed Murong Ditian and the others. You should be glad that you can live for a while longer. Xianhao kept the dark Yin sword behind his back. His black eyes were as cold as ice. Xianhao didn't get angry, nor did he say any harsh words. He turned around and headed towards the pill hall. The reason why he did that was because he was extremely confident that Yiguchen wouldn't be able to escape from his grasp. Senior Yi, are you alright? Mu Xingzu and the others went forward and asked with concern. I'm fine. Let's go to the pill hall, said Yiguchen. Although Xianhao would also go to the pill hall, Yiguchen didn't want to miss such a great opportunity because of Xianhao. After that, everyone around the Sword Pavilion Valley flew towards the pill hall. The pill hall was very close to the Sword Pavilion. It was a magnificent hall that was gilded with gold. Under the erosion of time, it revealed an ancient and heavy feeling. At this moment, the formation outside the pill hall was emitting light and trembling. The entire pill hall was also emitting light. At the same time, a strong fragrance of Dan Qi permeated the air, making people feel comfortable all over. When Yiguchen and the others arrived outside the pill hall, they couldn't help but sigh. As expected of a great sect from ancient times, its foundation was indeed not something that the current 7 great powers could compare to. Brother Yi, the pill hall's method of obtaining opportunities is quite unique, Chu Qingqi said. Oh, is it different from the Sword Pavilion? Yiguchen asked curiously. Do you see the pill furnace in front of the hall and the 10 prayer mats around it? Chu Qingqi pointed. Yiguchen followed his gaze and saw a bronze pill furnace standing in the middle of the hall. The pill furnace had 3 legs and 2 handles. Its exterior was a simple and mottled bronze color. The fragrance of Dan Qi in the hall was coming from the pill furnace. Other than that, there were 10 prayer mats that were covered in dust around the pill furnace. Could it be that the pill hall's elixirs are in the pill furnace? Yiguchen asked. That's right. There's a powerful formation around the pill furnace. It's impossible to obtain the elixirs by force. The only way to obtain the elixirs is to sit on the prayer mats around it. Those prayer mats have the ability to test a martial artist's talent, Chu Qingqi explained. It can test one's talent. Yiguchen revealed a strange expression. His strange expression wasn't because of the prayer mat's ability. Instead, it was because he was thinking about how high his talent had reached. Thinking about it, even Yiguchen couldn't determine how high his talent was. It shouldn't be too bad, right? Yiguchen thought to himself. At this moment, the pill hall's square was filled with people from various forces. From afar, a few ferocious figures flew over. The people in the lead were Demon Blade Nialing, Blood Blade Mo Juechen and Mad Blade Shin Tu Miao. It's the people from the saber-conferred King's Palace. As the people from the saber-conferred King's Palace arrived, the atmosphere in the pill hall's square became turbulent. Yiguchen, Mo Juechen's voice was filled with boundless hatred as he spoke. He stared coldly at Yiguchen like a bloodthirsty wolf. Previously, the Sword Pavilion wasn't attractive to the people from the saber-conferred King's Palace. However, when the pill hall opened, the people from the saber-conferred King's Palace sensed it and naturally came over. Heh! Yiguchen is really unlucky now, Pan Shuoyan gloated. Xianhao was in front of him and Mo Juechen was behind him. They weren't people to be trifled with. Murong Ditian and the others were also watching coldly from the side. They seemed to want to see Yiguchen being killed. This was the only way to vent the anger in their hearts. Mo Juechen, are you going to take action? Yiguchen's tone was cold. Beside him, the blood cloud centipede took a step forward. With a boom, the entire pill hall square seemed to shake. Mo Juechen glanced at the blood cloud centipede and said coldly, the dignified sword sect can only rely on puppets? Then I would also like to ask. Even one of the 3 blades of the saber-conferred King's Palace, blood blade, would take advantage of the situation and attack me when I can't use my true chi. Do you have the guts to fight me again when I recover? Yiguchen didn't back down. You still have the time to recover. What a joke. Pan Shuoyan said with a sharp voice. With a mocking smile, she looked at Yiguchen with disdain. Yiguchen, you're really indulging in fantasy. You're delusional enough to think that you can undo the technique of the Starry Sword Pavilion's genius? Murong Ditian said coldly. It's useless to say more. Yiguchen shook his head slightly. Mo Juechen looked at the blood cloud centipede coldly and looked at the bronze cauldron again. After pondering for a while, he said coldly, after the pill hall's opportunity, you, Yiguchen, will definitely die. It was obvious that Mo Juechen was the same as Xian Hao. He didn't want to lose the pill hall's opportunity because of fighting with Yiguchen. Yiguchen didn't say anything else. Although the fight had stopped for the time being, the atmosphere was still filled with the smell of gunpowder. Everyone from the 7 major forces knew that there would be a bloody battle after the pill hall's opportunity. And the target of this bloody battle was the sword sect's Yiguchen. Rumble. As the pill hall's plaza trembled, the formation around the praying mats also gradually dispersed. The moment the formation dissipated, a few figures leaped out from the dense crowd and landed on the praying mats. There weren't any restrictions on the talent test. Hence, no one fought for it. Everyone had a chance. This was also why the pill hall was fairer than the sword pavilion. Xian Hao and the others weren't in a hurry. They stood there calmly and watched. Some disciples sat on the praying mats and were excited. Buzz! In the next moment, 10 white light pillars suddenly soared into the sky from the praying mats. Looking at the white light pillars, Yiguchen was a little confused. The white light pillars should represent ordinary talent. Although they can still get elixirs, they should only be of the spirit elixir level. Chu Qingqi said. Ordinary talent corresponds to spirit elixirs. Yiguchen suddenly understood. Although there wasn't a clear standard for the grade of elixirs, it could be roughly divided into spirit elixir, treasure elixir, quasi-sage elixir, and so on. It corresponded to spirit elixir, treasure elixir, quasi-sage elixir, and sage elixir. The white light pillars represented ordinary talent. They could only get spirit elixir. With my 7th grade prodigy talent, perfect physique, 1,000 feet sea of chi and so on, what kind of talent is it? Yiguchen was suddenly very curious. Chapter 298. On the 10 futons in front of the bronze cauldron. 10 white beams of light soared into the air, bringing with them faint fluctuations. The next moment, the bronze cauldron, which was located in the middle of the 10 futons and within the defensive array, began to buzz and tremble, and then its lid opened slightly. A variety of pills were mixed together, and an extremely rich pill fragrance spread out with the wind. That fragrance made one's limbs and bones feel as if they were relaxing after smelling it. Some people, just by smelling the pill fragrance, felt that the qi in their body seemed to have become more active. For a time, many blazing gazes were nailed to the bronze cauldron. But they also knew that it was impossible to obtain the bronze cauldron. No one could break that defensive array, and even experts of the divine dwelling stage could not forcibly take it away. Their only thought was to be able to obtain as many precious pills as possible. After the lid of the cauldron was opened, dozens of rays of light also spread out and then dispersed. The rays of light fell into the hands of the 10 people. Taking a closer look, they were pills, and each person was given a few. It's the blood chi pill for tempering the body. It's the yang gathering pill for practicing a fire attribute cultivation method. It's the blue marking pill with a strong healing effect. Among the 10 people, some were happy and some were sad. After all, the distribution of pills was random, and it was only based on each person's talent and aptitude that different levels of pills were distributed. These pills were all of the spirit level. But even if they were only spirit pills, because of the foundation of the Void Sword sect, they were not ordinary spirit pills, but top-grade spirit pills, and the effect was several times better than ordinary spirit pills. The 10 disciples sighed slightly, but they were not too disappointed. After all, with their talent, it was already considered good to be able to obtain top-grade spirit pills. So this is the way to obtain opportunities. Yiguchin, who was watching from the side, finally understood. But it was also because of this that he was even more curious about his own talent and aptitude. After these 10 people, the disciples of the 7 major forces came forward one after another. But most of them, without exception, had ordinary aptitude and emitted white beams of light. What they obtained were all top-grade spirit pills. Then, a beautiful figure in pink landed on the futon. It was Zither Fairy. Yiguchin was a little curious and was paying attention. Hee, I'm interested too. On the other side, Pan Shuoyan spoke. She twisted her snake-like waist and actually landed on the praying mat at the same time. Clearly, Pan Shuoyan and Zither Fairy were at loggerheads in the Consonant's divine palace. Seeing Zither Fairy step forward to test her aptitude, Pan Shuoyan naturally wanted to compete with her. Facing Pan Shuoyan's provocative gaze, Zither Fairy's long eyelashes drooped slightly, and she ignored it. Damned bitch. Wait until the talent test results. Let's see how arrogant you are. Seeing Zither Fairy's indifferent manner, Pan Shuoyan viciously said in her heart. Buzz. The 10 praying mats were all filled with people. Soon after, pillars of light soared into the sky. It's a red pillar of light. At that moment, everyone cried out in surprise because they saw that what rose from Pan Shuoyan's side was not a white pillar of light, but a light red pillar of light. Compared to the monotonous white pillar of light from before, this light red pillar of light was very conspicuous. Hee, I do have some talent. Pan Shuoyan covered her red lips with her jade-like hand as she laughed proudly. However, before she could laugh, her face instantly froze. Boom! On Zither Fairy's side, a dark red pillar of light soared into the sky. Its aura was even stronger than Pan Shuoyan's. Pan Shuoyan's face stiffened as her face turned purple. She originally wanted to suppress Zither Fairy and compete with her. But now, everyone could see who had higher talent. Buzz! Buzz! The bronze cauldron in the middle trembled as elixirs flew out and landed in the hands of the 10 people. Among the 10 people, other than Zither Fairy and Pan Shuoyan, the rest were still in the white pillar of light. Naturally, they could only obtain elixirs. It's the spirit elixir. Pan Shuoyan focused her gaze and realized that she had 3 spirit elixirs in her hands. The spirit elixir was a treasure elixir. Among the 7 major forces, only the true elites could obtain it. The quality of the spirit elixir in the bronze cauldron was clearly several times better than the spirit elixirs that Yiguchin and the others obtained. However, at this moment, everyone's gaze landed on Zither Fairy. Could this be the heavenly soul elixir? Zither Fairy looked at the elixir in her hand. Although there was only one, the faint ripple that it emitted was 10 times stronger than the spirit elixir. Damn slut! Pan Shuoyan's face darkened. She did not say a word and retreated with a cold expression. Zither Fairy was very satisfied with the elixir. After keeping it, she landed beside Yiguchin. Congratulations, elder sister. Mu Xingzu smiled. Zither Fairy pursed her lips and smiled. She turned to look at Yiguchin and asked with a trace of curiosity in her eyes, Zither Fairy wants to know what kind of elixir young Master Yi obtained. Yiguchin smiled but did not say a word. He did not know either. On the other side, when Pan Shuoyan heard this, she said in a strange tone, he's a crippled person. It's hard to say if he can activate the Pillar of Light. After being defeated by Zither Fairy, Pan Shuoyan was extremely unhappy. Naturally, she would say a few words. Yiguchin did not care about her. I don't believe it. In the Sword Pavilion, you relied on the enlightened Sword Heart to obtain such a harvest. In the Pill Hall, it's not a competition of Sword Dao talent, it's a competition of talent. You're a crippled person. How can you activate the pillar of light? Pan Shuoyan guessed in disdain. After the two of them, there were a few people who were worth paying attention to who went up to take the test. Prince Yuanyi stepped out. At the same time, Yuan Mia also stepped out. The grudge between the two of them could not be resolved. It was a death grudge. In the end, the two of them activated the red pillar of light. However, Prince Yuanyi and Pan Shuoyan were the same. They were only faintly red. On the other hand, Yuan Mia's color was darker than Zither Fairy's. It was obvious that his talent was stronger than Zither Fairy's. After that, Shintu Miao, Murong Ditian and the others stepped out at the same time. Murong Ditian's gaze was cold and provocative as he looked at Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen ignored him. Boom! The two of them also activated the red pillar of light with their talent and strength. The degree of activation was similar to Yuan Mia's. After obtaining the supreme elixir, Murong Ditian retreated. At the same time, he looked at Yi Guchen and said, Yi Guchen, why don't you go up to take the test? Weren't you very impressive in the sword pavilion? Or do you know that you don't have the ability to activate the pillar of light? We'll see in a while, Yi Guchen replied faintly. Humph, you're so stubborn. Let's see how you're going to deal with this later. Murong Ditian's face darkened. After them, the rest of the people also took the test. After that, Nia Ling, Mo Juechen, Fang Chen, Chen Yi, Ji Yan, Ji Ling, Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian and the others all activated the green pillar of light that was of a higher grade than the red pillar of light. Their harvest was also extraordinary. They all obtained supreme grade supreme elixirs. Moreover, it wasn't just one. This kind of harvest was definitely not small. It made Ji Ling and the others happy. Even Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian and the others, who were humiliated in the sword pavilion, had a trace of a smile on their faces. Then, they looked at Yi Guchen with playful gazes. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered as he stepped forward. On the other side, Xian Hao also stepped forward at the same time. Due to the fact that almost everyone present had finished their test, it was rather strange that only Yi Guchen and Xian Hao had stepped out. Everyone held their breaths because Yi Guchen and Xian Hao could be said to be two extremes. One was Xian Hao, who had the highest talent and cultivation among everyone here. The other was Yi Guchen, who couldn't even compare to the Qi refinement realm. This kind of contrast was too dramatic. Therefore, it attracted everyone's attention. Xian Hao glanced at Yi Guchen indifferently. Do you want to humiliate yourself so badly? Yi Guchen replied with a glance. I'll return those words back to you. At this moment, everyone's gazes gathered. Between the two of them, the wind and clouds surged. Chapter 299. At this moment, the people from the 7 major forces were looking at the two people who were walking towards the praying mats. They didn't have much suspense about Xian Hao. They knew that he had extraordinary talent. However, Yi Guchen's cultivation was crippled. This was a very interesting fact. Many people even doubted whether he would be able to trigger the light beam. Yi Guchen, with your talent in the sword Dao, you can indeed show off in the sword pavilion. However, your true Qi is crippled and you have lost your talent. How are you going to get the recognition of the Pill Hall and obtain the opportunity? Murong Ditian's expression was cold. At the same time, he was looking forward to what would happen next. It was because he was too sullen. In the past, Murong Ditian had always been suppressed by Yi Guchen. Even though Yi Guchen's cultivation was crippled now, in the sword pavilion, Murong Ditian was like a clown who was being toyed with. It made Murong Ditian feel extremely embarrassed. Murong Ditian couldn't wait to see Yi Guchen embarrass himself. Ji Yan, Crown Prince Yuanyi, Pan Shuoyan and the others had the same thought as Murong Ditian. Even in the inner court, Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao and the others didn't say anything on the surface, nor did they say anything sarcastic. However, in their hearts, they wanted to see Yi Guchen fail and embarrass himself. Among them, Bai Zichen and Wang Xiaotian had the most extreme thoughts. Needless to say, Wang Xiaotian almost fought with Yi Guqin to the death. As for Bai Zichen, he was extremely prideful and cared a lot about his reputation. Previously, when Yi Guqin asked him in an inexplicable tone whether he was the one who left the mark on the one-sword cliff, Bai Zichen felt a little uneasy. After what happened in the sword pavilion, Bai Zichen's attitude towards Yi Guqin changed from indifference to hatred. Yi Guqin, although I don't know if you know the truth about the one-sword cliff, can you still create a miracle this time? Bai Zichen squinted his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Senior brother Yi. Mu Xingzhu and the others also felt their hearts clench. They were extremely nervous. Although they believed in Yi Guqin, the pill hall wasn't testing one's talent in the sword Dao. It was testing one's innate talent. As for Yi Guqin, everyone knew that his qi and blood had been squeezed dry during his battle with Gu Xiaoyang. He had lost all his true qi, and his talent was long gone. This was also what Mu Xingzhu and the others were worried about. At this moment, many people, regardless of whether they were on Yi Guqin's side or his enemies, unconsciously held their breaths, waiting for the moment the result would be revealed. Xian Hao's expression was indifferent and calm, as if he didn't have the slightest bit of worry. As the top genius of the limitless sword sect, he had the right to be so confident. Yi Guqin, I do admire your courage to stand up, but this courage will only embarrass you in the end. Xian Hao glanced indifferently at Yi Guqin before his gaze landed on the futon. At that moment, the entire pill hall fell into a dead silence. In such silence, everyone stared at Xian Hao without blinking. They were afraid that they would miss a single change. As for the disciples of the Limitless Sword sect, they opened their eyes wide. They wanted to know how strong Xian Hao's innate talent was. Finally, after a few breaths' time, an extremely vigorous and vast golden light pillar soared into the sky from the futon. Boom! A powerful fluctuation exploded. The golden light pillar seemed to have pierced through the heavens, crossing the heavens and the earth. At this moment, everyone outside the pill hall was extremely shocked. An uproar spread out like a tidal wave. Gold, it's a golden light pillar. A golden light pillar that has never appeared before. Xian Hao's innate talent is actually so strong. At this moment, the disciples of the 7 major forces opened their mouths wide. They couldn't hide the shock in their hearts. Xian Hao's innate talent is so strong. This, even Nie Ling, Mo Juechen, Chen Yi, Fang Chen, and the rest of the geniuses were shocked when they saw the magnificent golden light pillar. Even with their innate talent, they could only trigger the green light pillar. This meant that Xian Hao's innate talent was even stronger than theirs. Xian Hao. Murong Ditian clenched his fists tightly. There was an extremely complicated expression on his face. He knew that his innate talent was far from Xian Hao's. However, as long as I can humiliate Yi Guqin and make him miserable, it's enough. Murong Ditian's face was cold. Pan Shuoyan and the others were also shocked. Then, they couldn't help but look at Yi Guqin. Their eyes were filled with mockery. As the golden light pillar soared into the sky, the bronze cauldron in the middle also trembled like never before. After that, a resplendent pill soared into the sky like a star and landed in Xian Hao's hand. That fluctuation, it's the quasi-sage elixir. It was unknown who it was that let out an extremely shocking roar, and the tone of the roar was extremely fiery. Quasi-sage elixir. Everyone's gaze fell on Xian Hao's hand. Their eyes were red and burning. 9 revolutions true spiritual elixir, not bad. The elixir in Xian Hao's hand was as round as jade. There were 9 runes around it. Quasi-sage elixir, 9 revolutions true spiritual elixir. 9 revolutions true spiritual elixir, rumor has it that after consuming it, the genuine qi in 1 sea of qi will double. Everyone's gaze was filled with envy and desire as they looked at the elixir in Xian Hao's hand. That was a quasi-sage elixir. Even for Chen Yi, Nie Ling, Fang Chen, and the other geniuses, it was almost impossible for them to get a quasi-sage elixir in their own forces. That was because the quasi-sage elixir was too precious. Although everyone's gaze was filled with desire at that moment, their rationality told them that if they wanted to snatch Xian Hao's elixir, it would be no different from courting death. Although Xian Hao was arrogant and aloof, he had obtained a quasi-sage elixir. However, at this moment, he had obtained an extremely precious quasi-sage elixir. Hence, he could not help but curl his lips into a faint smile. He turned to look at Yi Guqin. Not only Xian Hao, everyone's gaze turned towards Yi Guqin. With a gem like Xian Hao in front of him, everyone couldn't help but look at Yi Guqin with pity. Heh! Yi Guqin is really pitiful. He actually encountered Xian Hao. Even if his genuine qi wasn't crippled, even if he triggered the green light pillar, he's still like a firefly compared to the moon when compared to Xian Hao. That's right. Even if Yi Guqin was in his peak condition, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to achieve Xian Hao's current result. Many discussions started to spread out. Yi Guqin, you can indeed show off in the sword pavilion. But now, let's see how you're going to be so arrogant. Pan Shulian didn't hesitate and mocked Yi Guqin. Because she was infuriated by Yi Guqin previously. Yi Guqin, I'll wait for your miserable moment. Prince Yuanyi revealed a smile that he hadn't seen for a long time. Yi Guqin, if you can still overturn the heavens in the pill hall today, I, Murong Ditian, will crawl out of here. The veins on Murong Ditian's temples were throbbing. He couldn't wait to see Yi Guqin's miserable state. Oh. Yi Guqin's eyes moved and looked at Murong Ditian. Why? Are you feeling guilty? I've already said so. Don't tell me you don't want to take the test anymore. Murong Ditian thought that Yi Guqin was feeling guilty when he saw this. His face revealed a trace of satisfaction from taking revenge. No, I just feel sorry for you. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly. You're still so stubborn even now. Pan Shulian bit her tongue and glanced at Yi Guqin in disdain. Yi Guqin didn't say anything. Actually, he didn't know how talented he was. After all, his qi was sealed. However, Yi Guqin's pride made him fearless. Yi Guqin, I told you not to humiliate yourself. Xian Hao said with a condescending tone. Ridiculous. Yi Guqin suddenly stepped into the praying mat. In an instant, the heavens and earth became deathly silent. Chapter 300. At this moment, the air around the pill hall seemed to have frozen. No one dared to breathe loudly. They were all staring at Yi Guqin. Although most people didn't think that Yi Guqin had the ability to activate the light pillar, Yi Guqin was still a sword master. After all, Yi Guqin was a sword master. He had created many miracles. Hence, everyone was curious. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, as time passed, a total of 10 breaths had passed. However, the praying mat that Yi Guqin was on still didn't move. It was as if it didn't have any effect. Ha, Yi Guqin, to think that you would be in such a sorry state today. When Murong Ditian, who was staring at Yi Guqin, saw this, he suddenly started laughing loudly. This laughter spread throughout the entire pill hall, allowing everyone to hear it clearly. Murong Ditian had lost his composure and laughed loudly. He had been suppressed for too long. Previously, he had been suppressed by Yi Guqin. The miracles that Yi Guqin had created caused Murong Ditian to feel a little nervous. When he said that he would crawl out, he was a little impulsive. After he said that, Murong Ditian felt a little regretful. At the same time, he felt a little nervous. After all, who knew if Yi Guqin would be able to shock everyone again? However, the current result made Murong Ditian heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, he laughed without any hesitation. He hadn't experienced such a carefree feeling for a long time. As they saw Murong Ditian laughing heartily, the surrounding disciples were somewhat surprised. However, when they turned to look at Yi Guqin, there was a deeper sense of pity in their eyes. On the praying mat, Yi Guqin frowned slightly. When he stepped on the praying mat, he did feel a faint fluctuation that was emitted from the praying mat. It was as if it was scanning his body. However, that fluctuation didn't just scan him once. It continuously scanned him, as if it couldn't confirm Yiguchen's talent. Why is that? Yiguchen was puzzled and curious at the same time. He was certain that everyone, including Xian Hao and the others, had only scanned the area once. That was why the pillar of light had appeared immediately. Could it be that with my talent and aptitude, this praying mat can't detect it on the first try? Yiguchen was puzzled. At this moment, a faint white glow finally appeared on the praying mat. It's a white pillar of light. Ha! It's a white pillar of light. However, for someone like Yiguchen, who has lost all of his Jinqi, to be able to activate the pillar of light is already pretty good. Some people laughed out loud when they saw the white pillar of light on the praying mat. Murong Ditian's laughter still didn't weaken, and his eyes were filled with carefreeness and disdain. So what if he had triggered the white pillar of light? That was only the most ordinary aptitude, which was even inferior to his red pillar of light, let alone compared to Xian Hao and the others. White light pillar, heh. Xian Hao didn't mock him too much. However, that heh was meaningful and playful. Senior brother Yi. Mu Xingzu clenched her fist tightly. She didn't believe that Yiguchen's talent was only so. Sigh, he has lost all of his Jinqi. It's already not easy for him to trigger the pillar of light, Ji Ling sighed. As for Bai Zichen and the others, the corners of their mouths curled up into a smile. Yiguchen had already been in the limelight in the sword pavilion. If he was still in the same situation in the pill hall, it would really make people unhappy. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, Yiguchen realized that the ripples emitted by the praying mat had seeped into his bones and tendons, as if it wanted to investigate more carefully. After a few breaths of time, the white pillar of light suddenly turned red. It wasn't a faint red, but a deep red that was as dense as the setting sun. The change in the praying mat's pillar of light was out of everyone's expectations. They opened their eyes wide and looked at the pillar of light that turned from white to red. How is this possible? The group of people was dumbfounded. Even Murong Ditian's laughter had weakened a lot. The corners of his eyes twitched slightly. Could it be that the perfect physical body has been detected? Yiguchen guessed in his heart. After that, the ripples from the praying mat seeped into his sea of qi again. Although his sea of qi was sealed by the spirit-devouring insect, the ripples still seeped in. The 1,000 feet sea of qi had been discovered. Boom! The deep red pillar of light changed again. It turned into an extremely dense green color. Green pillar of light. When the glaring green pillar of light soared into the sky, everyone's expressions changed. Everyone present did not know what kind of expression was on their faces. Shock, horror, doubt, puzzlement, all sorts of emotions were present. How is this possible? Nia Ling, Mo Juechen, Ji Yan, Fang Chen, Bai Zichen, Ji Ling, and the others opened their mouths, but no words came out. Yiguchen's performance was already on par with them. Is this still a person whose true qi is crippled? A prodigy swallowed his saliva and said with a dry voice. As for Murong Ditian, his laughter was already very forced. Perhaps it was because he had laughed for too long, but the corners of his mouth were stiff and he couldn't retract them. However, it wasn't over yet, when the ripples from the praying mat swept across Yiguchen's brain. His soul power, which had yet to form a sea of consciousness, was already more vigorous than a divine soul expert. At that moment, it roared. Buzz! The deep green pillar of light shook violently again. Then, under everyone's astonished gaze, it turned golden. It was as golden as the sun. Boom! The entire pill hall shook. That golden pillar of light was even brighter than Xian Hao. It connected the heavens and the earth like a pillar that supported the heavens. Impossible. Even Xian Hao couldn't remain calm. His gaze was fixed on Yiguchen's body. This person whose true qi was crippled, and who was even weaker than a qi refinement realm martial artist, actually had the same talent as him. Xian Hao couldn't believe it. As for Murong Ditien, his laughter was as hoarse as a spasm. It was hard for him to make any sound. His eyes were filled with madness and disbelief. However, this still wasn't the end. When the ripples from the praying mat gathered on the thunder calamity sword in Yiguchen's dantian. In an instant, the praying mat seemed to be unable to withstand the power and started to burn. Just as the praying mat was burning, an incomparably frightening fluctuation suddenly erupted. The extremely dazzling purplish gold pillar of light was like a dragon roaring in the 9 heavens. Accompanied by an illusory purplish gold divine dragon's shadow, the purplish gold pillar of light shot straight to the heavens. At this moment, everyone in the Void Sword realm, no matter where they were, as long as they raised their heads slightly, they could see the roaring purplish gold divine dragon in the void. The purplish gold pillar of light shot across the heavens. Everyone was shocked. Everyone was stunned. Everyone couldn't believe it. The purplish gold pillar of light represented Yiguchen's talent. It surpassed everyone, and it even surpassed Xian Hao. He was worthy of being the king of heaven's pride. At this moment, the pill hall shook violently. The heavens and the earth were boiling. Chapter 301. The purplish gold light pillar was accompanied by a divine dragon, and it stretched across the sky for a long time. Yiguchen stood in the middle of the purplish gold light pillar like a prodigy, and a terrifying pressure spread in all directions. It wasn't pressure from his cultivation. It came from Yiguchen's monstrous talent. A perfect physical body, 1,000 feet sea of energy, a monstrous soul power, and the sword of lightning tribulation. Because of all these, Yiguchen's talent was judged to be superior. Even the praying mat that was used for the test directly burned, exploded, and turned into a pile of ashes. However, this wasn't all of Yiguchen's talent. One had to know that Yiguchen was a 7th grade prodigy, and he had the innate sword embryo. It was only because the innate sword embryo was taken away by Gu Xiaoyang that it was missing. However, if the innate sword embryo wasn't taken away, Yiguchen wouldn't even need the sword of lightning tribulation, and he would be able to activate the purplish gold light pillar directly. After all, even in ancient times, 7th grade prodigies were extremely rare. This was Yiguchen's top grade talent. Everyone stared blankly at the purplish gold light pillar, and they couldn't make a sound for a long time. As for Murong Ditien, he didn't know what he was feeling at this moment. He opened his mouth, but he couldn't say anything. The light emitted by the purplish gold light pillar shone on Murong Ditien's twisted and stiff face, and it was hard to see what expression he had. No. How is this possible? His true qi is crippled. How is this possible? Pan Shuoyan looked as if she was struck by lightning, and her delicate body trembled slightly. Her pretty face was already pale, and her rosy lips couldn't stop trembling. She stared blankly at the purplish gold light pillar that made her feel suffocated. That was a talent that even Xian Hao couldn't activate. Ji Yan, Prince Yuani, Fang Chen, Mia Ling, Mo Juechen, and the rest also couldn't make a sound. On the other side, Mu Xingzu, Fairy Qin, and the rest covered their mouths with their jade-like hands. They might have had confidence in Yiguchen, but they never thought that Yiguchen's talent would be so monstrous. It was completely beyond their expectations. Yiguchen is really... Ji Ling was so shocked that she was speechless. Yiguchen's position in her heart had risen to the same level as Yan Wushuang, Xian Hao, and Gu Zun. Even though Yiguchen was not as strong as them right now. As for Bai Zichen and the others, they were dumbstruck and didn't know what kind of expression they should show. Why? Yiguchen was already so monstrous in the sword pavilion. Why is it the same in the pill hall? The corners of Bai Zichen's eyes were twitching, and the hands hidden in his sleeves were tightly clenched, as if he was unable to accept Yiguchen stealing the limelight. Yiguchen, who was inside the purple gold pillar of light, ignored the complicated gazes around him. He was wondering what grade of pill he would be able to obtain. Would it be a sage to be? Not far away from Yiguchen, Xian Hao's expression was completely frozen. His temperament was extremely detached. Even though Yiguchen's talent was in front of him, he still felt a little astonished and couldn't believe it. However, his expression didn't change much. The killing intent in his eyes was as cold as an ice abyss. No. Cheating. I know. Yiguchen, you cheated. I saw with my own eyes that you were struck by Gu Xiaoyang's technique in the barren plains, and your sea of qi was destroyed. How is this possible? How can you still have such talent? You must have used some special technique. Murong Ditian, who had been absent-minded, suddenly thought of something. His finger trembled as he pointed at Yiguchen. His expression was twisted with madness and malevolence. He couldn't accept that Yiguchen still had such talent. That's right. There must be something wrong with the praying mat. Look, isn't the praying mat burnt to ashes? Maybe something went wrong. The astonishment on Pan Shuoyan's face also turned into suspicion and disbelief. She didn't believe that the trash Yiguchen in her eyes could still have such talent. As the two of them spoke, the rest of the people who were enemies of Yiguchen also revealed their doubts. That's right. Yiguchen must have used some method that we don't know about. That's right. Otherwise, how could someone who isn't even in the qi refinement realm have such talent? Many voices of suspicion spoke, as though they were trying to cover up their astonishment. At this moment, many doubtful gazes were fixed on Yiguchen. It was as though they wanted to see through him. Yiguchen faced the many gazes and sneered indifferently. Why would the sword demon need to explain his actions to others? Yiguchen was disdainful. Just at this moment, the illusory divine dragon that coiled around the purple gold light pillar roared towards the sky, shaking the 9 heavens. After that, the illusory purple gold divine dragon broke away from the purple gold light pillar and charged towards the bronze cauldron in the middle. Finally, under everyone's gazes, it completely merged into the cauldron. The elite disciples of the 7 superpowers were all puzzled. No elixir came out. Yiguchen indeed used some tricks. Murong Ditian's eyes, which were originally filled with a trace of madness, were now filled with hope. That's right. No elixir came out. Yiguchen's talent is indeed fake. Without any elixir, this test is meaningless. Let's see how Yiguchen is going to deal with this. Seeing that no elixir came out from the cauldron, the majority of the people were even more convinced of Murong Ditian and Pan Shuoyan's words. Yiguchen was using some tricks. I don't believe it. Mu Xingzu shook her head and bit her moist lips. She believed that Yiguchen was disdainful to use such tricks. Buzz buzz. Just as everyone was discussing, the bronze cauldron that had been silent suddenly started to shake violently. Boom! 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 It was as if something was violently hitting the cauldron. Could it be? Hearing the clear sound of the collision, everyone who was discussing immediately shut their mouths. Their gazes were glued to the bronze cauldron and they were unable to shift their gazes away. Boom! Following the sound of a huge bell, a forceful elixir came out from the cauldron. It was like a small sun as it forcefully broke out from the cauldron. The ripples that it emitted were even stronger than the 9 revolutions true spiritual elixir that Xian Hao had obtained previously. As the light dissipated, a translucent elixir appeared in everyone's vision. That elixir was like a translucent gemstone and within it, there was an existence that looked like a baby sitting cross-legged. That was naturally not a real baby, but an elixir that had shown its power. Oh my God, it can't be. Could that be the heavenly soul infant soul elixir that was recorded in the ancient alchemy book? Sage elixir, the heavenly soul infant soul elixir is a true sage elixir. It is rumored that a heavenly soul infant soul elixir can allow one to form a sea of consciousness and even increase one's spiritual power to the 9 transformations level. A single pill could directly create a proud son of heaven with a divine soul transformation like Xian Hao. Who wouldn't be envious? Who wouldn't be crazy about it? At this moment, everyone who saw the heavenly soul infant soul elixir, including the usually aloof Xian Hao, couldn't suppress their desire to devour it. Everyone had gone completely crazy. Chapter 302. The entire outside of the pill hall was filled with deep panting sounds. It was the uncontrollable desire when they saw the sage elixir. A sage elixir. Even the 7 major forces wouldn't be able to take out such an elixir. Even a quasi-sage elixir was extremely rare. Otherwise, the 9 revolutions true spiritual elixir that Xian Hao obtained wouldn't have caused so many people to be jealous. However, compared to the value of the Heavenly Soul Infant Soul Elixir, the 9 revolutions true spiritual elixir was nothing. At this moment, the Heavenly Soul Infant Soul Elixir was floating above the bronze cauldron. Within the translucent elixir, a lifelike infant child was sitting cross-legged. Facing such an elixir, even Xian Hao couldn't ignore it. There was a trace of passion in his eyes. However, everyone knew that since Yi Guqin could draw out the elixir, it proved that he didn't use any unorthodox methods. Instead, his talent was truly recognized by the praying mat. Thinking of this, everyone looked at Yi Guqin with extreme astonishment. It was as if they were looking at a monster. His blood and qi were exhausted, and his true qi was crippled. However, his talent was still able to suppress Xian Hao. If Yi Guqin wasn't a monster, then what was he? As for Murong Ditian, Pan Shuelian and the others, they already felt ashamed. Murong Ditian stared blankly at the sage elixir that was emitting vigorous waves. That medicinal pill was like a slap, ruthlessly slapping his face. Just now, he still had a trace of hope and slandered Yi Guqin. He thought that Yi Guqin must have used some unorthodox methods to draw out the purple gold light pillar. However, not to mention the others, even the disciples of the Limitless Sword sect were looking at Murong Ditian with a trace of pity and sympathy. It was a gaze that looked at a loser. Those gazes were like steel needles that pierced Murong Ditian's heart. It made him feel as if there was a blade on his back. Murong Ditian, you said, that you want to crawl out of here? Yi Guqin tilted his head slightly and looked at Murong Ditian. Hearing Yi Guqin's words, Murong Ditian's entire body shook, and the blood in his heart surged up to his throat uncontrollably. He was so angered by Yi Guqin that he spat out a mouthful of blood from his heart. Yi Guqin. You. Murong Ditian's finger trembled as he pointed at Yi Guqin. He was clenching his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. The veins on his temples were popping out and throbbing with all their might. It was as if his veins were about to explode. Because Murong Ditian was truly filled with hatred. At that moment, the surrounding disciples of the other forces were also looking at Murong Ditian with ridicule in their eyes. As a prodigy who had been famous for a long time, if Murong Ditian were to really crawl out like a dog, that would truly be a joke. Pooh! Murong Ditian, who was both mentally and physically exhausted, finally reached his limit. He was unable to endure it any longer. After vomiting out a large mouthful of blood, he directly fainted on the ground. Even though he had fainted, his face was still filled with a twisted expression of unwillingness. I have already said that I feel sorry for you. Seeing this, Yi Guqin shook his head. The surrounding people looked at Murong Ditian, who had fainted from anger, and sighed. Perhaps only Yi Guqin had the ability to make a heaven's pride so angry that he fainted. Yi Guqin, you can't even protect yourself now. Do you still have the leeway to pity others? Just at that moment, Xian Hao, who had been silent all this while, spoke. This sentence seemed to have once again evoked the greed and desire in the hearts of everyone present. After all, the divine elixir was too rare, and could be said to be a priceless treasure. No matter how many crystal jades one had, one couldn't buy it. Thus, apart from Mu Xingzu, Chu Qingqi, Chen Yi, Ji Ling, and a few others who had a good relationship with Yi Guqin, the rest of the people present were all divine elixirs. No matter if they had any enmity with Yi Guqin or not, the rest of them were all drooling with greed because of the divine elixir. Treasures moved people's hearts. Moreover, Yi Guqin wasn't Xian Hao. Although his talent was shocking, he wasn't powerful enough to intimidate everyone present. Yi Guqin furrowed his brows tightly when he saw the many pairs of eyes that had turned scarlet and thirsty in an instant. However, Just as he was thinking of a way to break out of this situation, the bronze cauldron began to tremble again. What? The cauldron is trembling again. Could it be that another divine elixir is about to come out? Oh my god, Yiguchen's opportunity is really terrifying. After feeling the bronze cauldron tremble, the restless people temporarily calmed down. This was because they really wanted to know what kind of divine elixir would appear. Could it be another divine elixir? Someone guessed with a fiery tone. Just as everyone's gazes were focused on the cauldron, the bronze cauldron suddenly released a ray of light and directly sucked the nascent soul elixir, which was suspended in mid-air, back into the cauldron. This scene was out of everyone's expectations. They stared blankly at the bronze cauldron and were speechless for a long time. Damn it, the divine elixir is gone. How is this possible? It has already been spat out. How can it be taken back? Everyone was wailing and cursing loudly as if it was their own divine elixir that was taken back. Even Yiguchen was stunned by this scene. He couldn't understand what was going on. Could it be that Yiguchen is really faking it? Otherwise, why would the divine elixir be taken back? Pan Shuoyan couldn't help but doubt. However, because Yiguchen had brought about too many twists and turns, even with Pan Shuoyan's narrow-mindedness and harshness, she didn't dare to casually talk about it. She was afraid that she would be slapped in the face in the next moment. At this moment, the pill hall was silent. Everyone held their breaths. Only the bronze cauldron continued to tremble as if it was about to undergo some changes. Yiguchen frowned slightly. Suddenly, a loud and clear dragon roar spread out from the cauldron. Everyone was shocked to see that the illusory purple-gold divine dragon that Yiguchen had summoned earlier was coiling around the cauldron as if it was brewing something. Rumble. There seemed to be thunder roaring in the bronze cauldron. The defensive formation around the cauldron emitted a dazzling light as if it was desperately trying to suppress something. However, the defensive formation was counterattacked by the illusory purple-gold divine dragon. They collided and were destroyed. Could it be? Yiguchen's eyes suddenly flashed with a bright light. If his guess wasn't wrong, boom. Just as Yiguchen was guessing, the bronze cauldron that had been silent for thousands of years suddenly rose from the ground and broke through the defensive formation's restriction. This scene was out of everyone's expectations. The eyes of all the surrounding spectators almost popped out of their sockets. The bronze cauldron broke the formation on its own. It should be said that even experts of the divine dwelling stage couldn't forcibly break through the defensive formation. It was precisely because of this that the cauldron had always existed here and no one could take it away. But now, the bronze cauldron had soared into the air, and then shrank in the wind, turning into a palm-sized cauldron. It spun and landed on Yiguchen's palm. Even with Yiguchen's tenacious nature, he was still dazed for a moment when he saw the cauldron fall into his hands. This was the ancient cauldron of the Void Sword sect, and the elixirs in it were priceless. Boom! The people of the 7 great forces present, except for those who had a close relationship with Yiguchen, couldn't help but erupt with their cultivation. Their eyes were scarlet and blazing. If a saint elixir could make them go crazy, then this bronze cauldron full of elixirs was enough to make them risk everything to snatch it. This was a great opportunity that belonged to Yiguchen, but it also brought great killing intent to Yiguchen. Chapter 303. One should know that Xian Hao had previously obtained a quasi-divine elixir, which had caused many people to drool over it. Xian Hao's identity and strength had suppressed the others, so they didn't dare to do anything. But now, what Yiguchen had obtained was not only a quasi-divine elixir, but also not a divine elixir. It was an entire bronze cauldron. And everyone knew that there couldn't be only heavenly soul infant soul elixir in the bronze cauldron. Even if there was only one divine elixir in the cauldron, there must be more than one quasi-divine elixir. Not to mention everyone present, even the divine dwelling experts would be envious of the bronze cauldron. They couldn't resist such a great opportunity. Even Xian Hao, who had always been aloof and arrogant, couldn't shift his gaze away from the cauldron in Yiguchen's hands. Seeing such a situation, Mu Xingzu, Chu Qingqi, Ji Ling, Yiguchen, Chen Yi, Bai Yanji, Zither Fairy, and the others all landed around Yiguchen. Some of the inner yard disciples who had received favors from Yiguchen before also stood around Yiguchen to protect him. Other people, including Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, and the other disciples of the same sect, couldn't hide their blazing eyes as they stared at the cauldron in Yiguchen's hands. It should be said that one of the three great opportunities in the Void Sword realm, and all the opportunities in the Pill Hall, had fallen into the hands of Yiguchen. Who would miss such an opportunity? Yiguchen, you can't be thinking of taking all the elixirs in this cauldron for yourself, right? Pan Shuoyan walked out from the crowd, swaying her waist. Her face was also filled with unbearable desire as she stared at the cauldron in Yiguchen's hands. Pan Shuoyan. Yiguchen's eyes suddenly emitted a cold light, stabbing towards Pan Shuoyan like a sharp sword. Yiguchen was already extremely impatient with such a sharp and mean woman. Being stared at by Yiguchen's awe-inspiring gaze, even though Pan Shuoyan's cultivation was higher than his, she still retreated repeatedly at this moment, her jade-like face pale. However, her goal was the same as the disciples of the other factions. They were all targeting Yiguchen. This made Pan Shuoyan calm down a lot. She gritted her teeth and said, Yiguchen, you should know that all the opportunities in the Pill Hall are in this bronze furnace. If you monopolize them, what will happen to us? As Pan Shuoyan spoke, many of the surrounding martial artists nodded. The fervor in their eyes turned into a faint threat. Pan Shuoyan, you are truly shameless. Opportunities are obtained by those who are fated. This bronze cauldron originally belonged to young Master Yi himself. Why should he care about you? Zither Fairy's jade lips parted slightly. There was a trace of disgust in her beautiful eyes. You bitch. You have a good relationship with Yiguchen. Naturally, you will speak up for him. However, we are different. Yiguchen, don't even think about taking the cauldron for yourself today. Pan Shuoyan gritted her teeth, placed her hands on her waist, and scolded like a shrew. You. Zither Fairy didn't know how to scold people. At this moment, she was so angry that her face was flushed red. Yiguchen, hand over the cauldron obediently, bewitching blade Nia Ling of the sealed Blade King Palace walked out. His pair of bewitching eyes stared at Yiguchen. Yiguchen, hand over the cauldron. Just as Pan Shuoyan said, this cauldron isn't something that a cripple like you can monopolize, young Marquis Fang Chen walked out. He was wearing a black golden battle armor and holding a black golden spear. Yiguchen, although your talent is beyond our expectations, what's the use of it if you lose your life? Prince Yuanyi held the heavenly sacred 5-elemental wheel in his hand and said in a playful tone. Yiguchen, I've said that after the Pill Hall's fortuitous encounter, you will die. Mo Juechen dragged the sword burial blade with his single arm. At this moment, all of Yiguchen's enemies stepped out. A strong murderous aura spread out like a blood cloud in the sky. Whether it was Yiguchen's shocking talent or the bronze cauldron that he obtained, these geniuses already felt a strong sense of danger. They even had the thought of nipping this genius in the bud. They wanted to kill Yiguchen here and now. Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, why are you still standing there? Come and help. On the other side, Ji Ling shouted at Bai Zichen and the others. Since the situation was critical, everyone in the inner courtyard naturally had to stick together. However, Bai Zichen's eyes were filled with jealousy. He tried his best to speak in a calm tone. Actually, I also think that Yiguchen should hand over the bronze cauldron. What? Ji Ling's mind buzzed. She couldn't believe that those words came out of Bai Zichen's mouth. A man's wealth is his own ruin. Yiguchen can't hold the bronze cauldron alone. Wang Xiaotian's tone wasn't as calm as Bai Zichen's. It was very cold. Mu Xingzu, Chu Qingqi, and the others felt a chill in their hearts when they saw this. On the other hand, Yiguchen's eyes flashed with a cold light, but he wasn't surprised. Sometimes, human nature was like this. Ji Ling's beautiful eyes dimmed, and a trace of exhaustion appeared between her brows. Just as the atmosphere was about to explode, Xian Hao, who hadn't said anything until now, finally spoke. Yi Guqin, I'll give you two choices. First, hand over the ball of light and the bronze cauldron. I guarantee that you can leave safely, and no one will dare to attack you. Xian Hao's words caused an uproar, and Mo Juechen frowned. He wanted to kill Yi Guqin with his own hands. What's the second choice? Yi Guqin's gaze was indifferent as he asked. Kill you, and I'll personally take the ball of light and the bronze cauldron. Although it's a little troublesome, I don't care. Xian Hao's expression was calm. He was confident and qualified to say such words. Heh. Yi Guqin shook his head and laughed. You can still laugh. Xian Hao's eyes narrowed. The current Yi Guqin was in a desperate situation. Xian Hao alone was enough to bring fatal danger to Yi Guqin. Not to mention, Mo Juechen, Nia Ling, Fang Chen, Prince Yuani, and the others were watching covetously from the side. I'm laughing at you guys. You're so confident that you'll be able to defeat me? Yi Guqin's lips still carried a faint smile. Oh, you think you can overturn the heavens in my hands today? As Xian Hao's words fell, a powerful sword chi spread out. Even geniuses like Zither Fairy, Bai Yanji, and Chen Yi were forced to take a few steps back. I can't overturn the heavens right now, but I can fly. As Yi Guqin's words fell, he directly activated the power of the vermilion bird totem on his chest. An extremely hot and vigorous totem power surged out from the vermilion bird totem, forming a pair of gorgeous flaming wings on Yi Guqin's back. The flaming wings expanded like a vermilion bird spreading its wings. Yi Guqin's figure rose into the sky like a flame, turning into a blazing meteor and shooting into the distance. How is this possible? Wings of true chi. This Yi Guqin is a life and death chamber expert. Everyone was incomparably shocked as they involuntarily cried out. Chapter 304. Yi Guqin's move simply shocked everyone's eyes. That pair of gorgeous fire wings were burning with raging flames. As the wings flapped, it brought along a blazing gale. Just like that, Yi Guqin turned into a flaming meteor and shot into the distance. How is this possible? Hidden gate of life and death. Pan Shuoyan covered her mouth and let out an ear-piercing scream. This made her brain go blank and she couldn't react. It can't be the hidden gate of life and death. If Yi Guqin really has such a cultivation, would he still care about us? Even Xian Hao, he can ignore him. Prince Yuani gritted his teeth and said. On the other side, Mu Xingzu, Ji Ling and the others were also stunned by Yi Guqin's sudden move. Bai Zichen and the others' hearts skipped a beat. They couldn't believe it. That might be some kind of secret technique. I don't believe that he has the cultivation of the hidden gate of life and death. Blood Blade Mo Juechen's tone was cold. His figure flickered and he actually chased after Yi Guqin. Yes, it must be some kind of secret technique. Although a secret technique that allows one to fly is very rare, this is the only possibility. The people present weren't fools. They immediately reacted. Yi Guqin couldn't possibly have the hidden gate of life and death. Even so, Yi Guqin's hidden move still made the group gnash their teeth in anger. Damn it, how can we catch up? Everyone outside the pill hall flew towards the direction where Yi Guqin was flying towards. After all, that cauldron of elixirs was too tempting. No one was willing to give it up. Zither Fairy, Chu Qingqi, and the others also followed closely behind. They were afraid that Yi Guqin would meet with an accident. Xian Hao's figure flickered in the void like a ghost among the group of people chasing after him. With every passing second, Xian Hao's figure would move 100 feet forward. This was the extreme speed that the peerless void sword intent gave him. That should be the power of the totem. I didn't expect you to have such a trump card. But do you think you can escape from my grasp? That ball of light and the bronze furnace can only belong to me, Xian Hao. A cold light flashed in Xianhao's eyes. His gaze was extremely sharp. He had fought with some of the holy sons and holy daughters of the barbarian race, and even the more powerful Double Crown King. Naturally, he was no stranger to totem power. Although Xianhao was a little surprised that Yi Guqin could utilize the power of totems, he was not too surprised. This was because many cultivators in the Great Desolate Mansion, which was close to the Five Elements land, had also come into contact with totem power. However, they were unable to display the full power of their totem like the real barbarians. You want to find another way to cultivate the power of the totem because your real qi has been destroyed? How foolish. If you don't have the supreme totem of the barbarian race, your cultivation will stop forever. Xianhao thought coldly in his heart. Obviously, he thought that Yi Guqin was desperate. But how could he know what level Yi Guqin's totem was? The Void Sword realm had a wide range. The mountain range rose and fell, and many boundaries intersected with each other. In the distant sky, a flowing flame broke through the air, and the gorgeous fire wings left a red tail. It was Yi Guqin. Fortunately, I have the wings of vermilion bird. Otherwise, it would be really difficult to get out of that situation. Yi Guqin sighed softly. Although he was not afraid of danger, his strength had not recovered, and it was still not suitable for a head-on confrontation with others. After getting rid of these troubles, I will contact Yi Xia and go to the Thunder Tide land. Yi Guqin did not forget his main purpose of entering the Void Sword realm, which was to find the heavenly thunder to tear the seal of the Sea of Qi and break through the realm. It should be about time to get rid of them. Yi Guqin looked back, but there was no one behind him. Although his wings of vermilion bird were not wings of real qi, they also had extreme speed. Other cultivators could not catch up with him just by relying on their body movement. But at this moment, Yi Guqin suddenly felt a fluctuation of soul power in his mind. Could it be? Yi Guqin frowned. Behind him, a figure flashed continuously in the void. It was Xianhao. Yi Guqin's eyes suddenly darkened. Xianhao's speed was amazing. Although it was not true that he could travel through the void, it was not far off. With the help of the peerless void sword essence, Xianhao could flash at an extremely fast speed. Of course, this kind of continuous flash also consumed a lot of energy. Even Xianhao felt that his sea of qi was a little empty at this moment. But Yi Guqin's situation was not optimistic either. His vermilion bird totem power had not fully awakened, and the wings of vermilion bird consumed a lot of totem power. It could not support Yi Guqin to fly for a long time, and he needed to rest regularly to recover his strength. Yi Guqin, do you think you can escape? Xianhao said. Then let's see who has the last laugh. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed continuously, and he made up his mind. His figure abruptly turned and rushed in another direction. Xianhao frowned, but he followed closely. Swoosh! Just like that, Yi Guqin and Xianhao chased after each other. As time passed, the wings of vermilion bird on Yi Guqin's back started to become illusory, as if they could not continue. Yi Guqin, it seems that the farce is about to end. Seeing this, Xianhao's lips curled into a faint smile of victory. Is that so? Yi Guqin also smiled. He looked at the mountainous area in front of him. Rays of light from spirit formations rose into the air and flickered. That is. Xianhao also noticed that there was a continuous stretch of spirit formations in front of him. In the Void Sword realm, there were many spirit formations gathered together like this. No one knew what kind of spirit formations there were. Killing formations, maze formations, spirit gathering formations, and teleportation formations. Yi Guqin, do you want to die? If you step into the killing formation, your life will be taken in an instant. Xianhao's heart sank slightly. He guessed what Yi Guqin was going to do. Ha! Xianhao, why don't you take a gamble? Yi Guqin laughed loudly. At this moment, the wings of vermilion bird on his back completely faded and scattered into crimson light spots. Yiguchen's figure also fell rapidly from the sky towards the center of the spirit formation area. Boom! 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 In an instant, many spirit formations were activated and rays of light of various colors rose into the air. There were unparalleled sword formations, defensive formations, and countless spirit formations flashed and intertwined. Yiguchen's figure was directly submerged in the sea of light. Damn it! Even with Xian Hao's state of mind, his face was filled with gloom. Whether it was the dark golden light ball or the bronze elixir furnace, their value was immeasurable. However, Xian Hao was also extremely wary of the spirit formations. If he accidentally stepped on the wrong one, even with his cultivation of 9 transformations of the godly soul and many life-saving techniques, he would not be able to last a few breaths. Damn it, let's guard this place for a few days first. Xian Hao had no other choice but to stay here temporarily and wait for the spirit formation to fall silent before he investigated the situation. However, at this moment, in another mountainous area at the edge of the Void Sword Realm, a teleportation formation that was covered with dust and had been silent for a long time suddenly began to turn and emit rays of light. Immediately after the light flashed, Yiguchen's figure flashed out. Cough! He directly coughed out a large mouthful of blood. There were many wounds on his body that were dripping with blood. Obviously, Yiguchen also took a great risk and paid a great price. That spirit formation is indeed powerful. If I did not accidentally enter the teleportation formation, I might have really died. Yiguchen sat weakly on the ground and blood flowed from his body. However, it was worth it to pay such a price. Although Yiguchen was severely injured, his eyes were surging with joy. This time, Yiguchen made a big profit. Chapter 305. Before coming to the Void Sword Realm, Yiguchen's original goal was to find the heavenly thunder in the Thunder Tide. However, he didn't expect that the Sword Pavilion and Pill Hall would bring Yiguchen such a great opportunity. This was something that Yiguchen didn't expect. Let's find a place to recover first, Yiguchen muttered to himself. He found a remote mountain cave and hid within it. Although Yiguchen's injuries were severe, he didn't need to worry about healing elixirs with the Pill Hall's bronze cauldron in his hand. This bronze cauldron is also extraordinary. Yiguchen's origin ring flashed and a palm-sized cauldron appeared in his hand. Although the surface was mottled and simple, countless fine spiritual inscriptions could be vaguely seen flowing on it. Although Yiguchen couldn't determine the grade of the cauldron, it should be at least at the level of a mystical inscription divine weapon. This cauldron could expand or shrink, so it definitely wasn't an ordinary item. However, Yiguchen didn't have the intention to study the cauldron. He opened the cauldron's lid. Countless rays of light shone inside, as if it contained a small world filled with treasures. Although the cauldron could expand or shrink, the internal area was constant. It was very spacious. Those elixirs were gathered together and placed in a corner of the cauldron according to their grade. Even with Yiguchen's indifferent temperament, there was a hint of joy in his eyes at this moment. The nascent soul elixir was in the center of the cauldron like the sun. There were 12 quasi-sage elixirs around it. They were like stars, revolving around the nascent soul elixir. Only one sage elixir. Yiguchen was slightly disappointed. He wasn't greedy, but Yiguchen still had a glimmer of hope. If there was a healing sage elixir in the cauldron, it might be helpful for Su Jianshi. After all, a sacred pill was refined from a sacred herb. If it was a healing pill, it should be effective in waking her up. However, the nascent soul elixir was the only saint elixir he had. It was a saint elixir that could assist in the cultivation of soul power. It had no effect on healing injuries. However, even if it was the ancient Void Sword sect, it was already an unexpected surprise to have a holy pill. It seems that the only way to awaken Su Jianshi is in the barbarian 5-element temple. Yiguchen sighed, but he quickly pulled himself together and looked at the remaining 12 quasi-holy pills. Although the quasi-holy elixir's effect was far inferior to the holy elixir, it was still much better than supreme-grade treasure elixir. When Yiguchin had nothing to do in the inner courtyard, he had also flipped through some ancient books on medicinal pills to increase his knowledge. Therefore, Yiguchin was actually able to recognize the names and effects of these quasi-holy pills. He took out one of the dark green pills. This pill glowed with green light and emitted a fragrant aroma. It was as if it was formed from the condensation of nectar. This quasi-holy elixir was called the Jade Healing Elixir. It was a pill that was extremely helpful for healing injuries. Yiguchin directly opened his mouth and swallowed the Jade Healing Elixir. He began to heal his heavy injuries. The elixir cut open Yiguchin's body. An extremely pure medicinal effect spread like a warm current to Yiguchin's limbs and bones. In an instant, all the pores on his body relaxed and an extremely comfortable feeling spread throughout his body. As expected of a quasi-holy elixir, Yiguchin secretly praised. This Jade Healing Elixir's effect was similar to the Great Jade Spiritual Recovery Elixir that Jun Xiaoyao gave him before. It was only now that Yiguchin knew that the Great Jade Spiritual Recovery Elixir that Jun Xiaoyao gave him was also a quasi-holy elixir. Thinking of this, Yiguchin couldn't help but be speechless. Jun Xiaoyao was indeed a genius of a major force in the Nantian region. He could casually take out a quasi-holy elixir. With the Jade Healing Elixir, Yiguchin's injuries also recovered very quickly. After about 2 days, all the wounds on his body were healed. The state of his body was also almost recovered. With this bronze alchemy furnace, I don't have to worry about most of the elixir resources in the future. Yiguchin's eyes flashed. He was going to take the nascent soul elixir when he broke through. As for the other 11 quasi-holy elixirs, each had their own uses. Yiguchin would use them sparingly. As for the many remaining elixirs and spiritual elixirs, Yiguchin would use them wisely. Right now, the entire Void Sword realm should be crazily spreading the news that I have obtained an opportunity. I'd better wait a few days before going out. Yiguchin calculated in his heart. He didn't plan to go out to look for an opportunity immediately. This was because he still had the opportunity in the Sword Pavilion to digest. Yiguchin scanned the vital ring. Most of the spiritual level swordsmanship on the second level of the Sword Pavilion had been absorbed by him. These swordsmanship could be used as a reference, but now Yiguchin didn't plan to choose any of the swordsmanship to cultivate. He didn't want to bite off more than he could chew. What Yiguchin cared most about was the dark golden light cluster on the third level of the Sword Pavilion. It should be known that this light cluster was something that even Xian Hao coveted and swore to get. Moreover, Yiguchin could also sense that the swordsmanship in this dark golden light cluster should have a great relationship with the void sword skill. Without any hesitation, Yiguchin took out a dark golden jade slip from the dark golden light cluster. After some investigation, Yiguchin's eyes also surged with a trace of excitement. In the dark golden jade slip, a core swordsmanship of the ancient void sword sect was recorded. The superior king's level swordsmanship, Great Void Sword Wave. It turned out to be the superior king's level swordsmanship. As a sword fanatic, Yiguchin was naturally interested in this swordsmanship. Apart from the Thousand Deities Tribulation, Merciless Heaven, and other swordsmanship that were difficult to classify. Now, among the swordsmanship that Yiguchin cultivated, only the god-slaying swordsmanship could be compared with the Great Void Sword Wave. And only the 5th and 6th moves of the god-slaying swordsmanship could reach the power of the superior king's level swordsmanship. However, if you want to cultivate this Great Void Sword Wave, there is a threshold. The minimum requirement is to cultivate the Void Sword skill to the perfection of martial arts. This condition caused Yiguchin to be extremely surprised. The Void Sword skill was an upper spiritual level swordsmanship, and it was very difficult to cultivate it to the perfection of martial arts. Even if one was a heavenly talent in swordsmanship, it would be difficult to reach the requirement without 4 or 5 years of practice. But unfortunately, Yiguchin's understanding of swordsmanship could not be inferred by common sense. He had already cultivated the Void Sword skill to perfection, and was only one step away from the perfection of martial arts. However, Yiguchen also knew that although it was only one step away, this step was even more difficult to break through than all the previous realms combined. Because when a swordsmanship was cultivated to the perfection of martial arts, one could comprehend the ultimate move. That kind of power was not comparable to a small unique skill or a big killing move. And the ultimate move of the Void Sword skill was the key to the cultivation of the Great Void Sword Wave. It seems that this Great Void Sword Wave can't be cultivated at the moment, but with my understanding, it won't take long. Yiguchen had his own confidence in swordsmanship. At the same time, Yiguchen also understood why Xianhao was so eager to get this swordsmanship. The Great Void Sword Wave was very compatible with the Void Sword Essence. Just like Yiguchen's God-slaying sword technique combined with the Azura Sword Essence, it could double the power. If Xianhao really got the Great Void Sword Wave, as long as he cultivated it successfully, with this swordsmanship, even if he could not defeat all the geniuses, he would not be far from it. But unfortunately, Xianhao's opportunity was taken away by Yiguchen. I'll stay here to cultivate the Void Sword skill first, and check out the situation in a few days. Yiguchen made up his mind and began to cultivate the Void Sword skill here. A few days passed in a row, and Yiguchen's understanding of the Void Sword skill was also on the basis of perfection, slowly transforming towards the perfection of martial arts. At this moment, the communication jade slip in Yiguchen's origin ring reacted. Well, is it from Zither Fairy? Yiguchen raised his eyebrows. Chapter 306. Young Master Yi, you should be fine, right? Zither Fairy knows that you will definitely turn the misfortune into a blessing. I think that Pan Shuoyan should have made a move in the past few days. If young Master Yi has nothing to do, you can come here and join me. After checking the jade slip, Yiguchen's eyes flashed. Before entering the Void Sword realm, he had promised Zither Fairy that he would help her deal with Pan Shuoyan. As for Pan Shuoyan, Yiguchen only felt coldness in his heart. Back in the pill hall, it was Pan Shuoyan who had stirred up the conflict between everyone and Yiguchen. Yiguchen didn't mind getting rid of such people. Moreover, the Void Sword realm was a battlefield where the elites of the seven forces fought. If she died, Rhino Divine Palace couldn't make Yiguchen pay the price. After some preparations, Yiguchen also rushed towards the location in Zither Fairy's message. About a day later, Yiguchen's figure appeared at the edge of the Void Sword realm. Because the entire Void Sword realm was located in a space, generally speaking, the edge of the realm was the most dangerous. Because you didn't know where it came from, there would be a void turbulence. In that kind of void turbulence, not to mention spirit experts, even divine dwelling experts would die without a doubt if they were caught in it without special means. Yiguchen raised his eyes and looked at the distant sky. There were many gray void turbulences, rolling endlessly like gray dragons. This place is located at the edge of the Void Sword realm. There are many void turbulences, plus many strange and dangerous places. There aren't any famous treasures, so there are no traces of people. This made Yiguchen breathe a sigh of relief. In his current situation, it was really not suitable for him to appear in a place with many people. After all, the opportunities he had obtained were too coveted. At this moment, a figure in pink drifted over from a hidden place in the distance. Her figure was slender and her face was beautiful. It was Zither Fairy. Young Master Yi. Seeing Yiguchen's arrival, Zither Fairy's beautiful eyes shone brightly. She landed in front of Yiguchen, bringing with her a fragrant wind. Yiguchen nodded slightly and looked at Zither Fairy. Suddenly, he felt that her aura was a bit weak, as if she had been injured. Zither Fairy, are you injured? Yiguchen frowned. Zither Fairy pursed her lips and said with a smile, it's nothing serious. It's just that when you left the pill hall, Pan Shuoyan, Ji Yan, Fang Chen, Xianing, and the others wanted to capture us and use that as a threat to force you out. They deserve to die. Yiguchen involuntarily released his aura, and a cold aura gathered in his eyes. Then, with a wave of his hand, a peak-grade healing pill fell towards Zither Fairy. This. Even Zither Fairy was a little stunned. She was amazed by Yiguchen's style. However, when she remembered that Yiguchen had obtained the bronze alchemy furnace, she no longer hesitated and accepted the pill. Are you all okay? What about Xingzhu and the others? Yiguchen asked. We're fine. Although they were aggressive, we had Jiling, Chen Yi, and the other prodigies on our side. We managed to escape in the end, Zither Fairy said. That's good. Yiguchen's anxious heart calmed down a little. Young Master Yi, Pan Shuoyan and the others should have already reached this boundary. It's better for us to be careful. Zither Fairy's eyes flickered. Yiguchen nodded slightly. He followed Zither Fairy and flew towards the edge of the Void Sword Realm. Not long after Yiguchen and the others left, a delicate and beautiful figure flew towards them. Her face was like jade, and her eyebrows were black and her eyes were bright. Her pair of clear and misty eyes contained a trace of helplessness, a trace of panic and a trace of fear. This woman was Mu Xingzhu. Naturally, she was not invited by Zither Fairy. Instead, she was forced to come. I beg you, don't continue to follow Xingzhu. Sob. Mu Xingzhu's pretty face was crying as she kept flying. In the dense forest behind her, a blue figure flashed past like a ghost. If a man saw it, he would feel guilty and afraid, let alone a young girl like Mu Xingzhu. Wah, a ghost. Mu Xingzhu was so scared that she screamed. Coincidentally, she flew in the direction that Yiguchen, Zither Fairy, and the others had left. In the dense forest, the ghostly figure continued to drift, as if it was still singing faintly. 1,000 years on the broken blue bridge, Jun Wen's return is uncertain. After about 4 hours, Yiguchen and Zither Fairy almost reached the edge of the Void Sword Realm. There was only a dried-up riverbed here, running from the north to the south. On the riverbed, there was a dark blue stone bridge that had long been mottled and decayed. On the opposite side of the bridge, there was a barren mountain. Under the barren mountain, there was a pavilion. That should be the place of opportunity for the cave abode, Zither Fairy said from the side. Yiguchen frowned slightly and suddenly looked behind him. Young Master Yi, what's wrong? Zither Fairy asked in confusion. No, nothing, Yiguchen said, but his eyebrows were still tightly knitted. Just now, he seemed to vaguely feel a gaze on his back. That gaze made his body tremble slightly, and he felt a cold current surge from the bottom of his heart. This immediately reminded him of the ghostly figure that Mu Xingzhu had mentioned outside the sword pavilion. What exactly is it? Yiguchen thought to himself. Young Master Yi, the cave abode should be at the pavilion on the barren mountain. You just need to cross this bridge to reach it, Zither Fairy said. Yiguchen nodded slightly. At this moment, a voice that made Yiguchen's eyes reveal a hint of annoyance came from another direction. Hee. As expected, Zither Fairy, you still brought Yiguchen here. A voluptuous figure walked over with a proud smile. It was Pan Shuoyan. Pan Shuoyan, I knew you would be here. Where is your ally? Show yourself together. Zither Fairy's eyes were filled with disgust. Ha, you really know me well. Pan Shuoyan giggled, and even her huge breasts were shaking. Yiguchen, since you are here today, don't even think about leaving. A figure that was surging with a blazing aura appeared. He had a head of fiery red short hair and a pair of red crystal eyes. It was the little flame emperor that Yiguchen had fought before, Ji Yen. You managed to rope in the little flame emperor. Zither Fairy's eyes flashed. This was not beyond her expectations. However, Yiguchen, today, this Crown Prince wants you to spit out all the opportunities you have. Crown Prince Yuani appeared with the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel in his hand. Zither Fairy's expression changed slightly. She did not expect Pan Shuoyan to be so magnanimous as to find someone else. One had to know that for every person Pan Shuoyan found, she would have to give out an additional opportunity. Yiguchen, today, Not only the opportunities of this cave abode, but also your opportunities will all belong to us. Young Marquis Fengchen appeared, wearing black and gold battle armor and holding a black and gold spear. His aura was domineering. Young Marquis. Zither Fairy's expression completely changed. Chapter 307. She didn't expect Pan Shuoyan to be so generous. Not only did she rope in Little Flame Emperor, but she also joined forces with Prince Yuani and young Marquis Fengchen. In this way, even if Pan Shuoyan obtained the cave dwelling, she would have to share it with the other three. Pan Shuoyan, when did you become so generous? Zither Fairy's face was solemn. Ha, if it's just the cave dwelling, I wouldn't be willing to part with it. Perhaps I would only rope in one ally, but I expected you to call Yiguchen, and Yiguchen has obtained enough for us to share, Pan Shuoyan said with a smile. One had to admit that she was indeed scheming. Alright, let's not talk too much. Things might change if we delay. Let's capture Yiguchen first and seize his opportunity. Then, we can explore the cave residence. Young Marquis Fengchen's tone was cold. The black gold spear in his hand trembled, and the air exploded. Fengchen was a genius that wasn't weaker than Ji Yan and Chen Yi. Even if he wasn't as strong as Xian Hao, he was still very important. Kill. Without saying anything else, Pan Shuoyan, Ji Yan, Prince Yuani, and Fengchen attacked Yiguchen and Zither Fairy. Zither Fairy, hold Pan Shuoyan back. Yiguchen shouted. The origin ring on his finger flashed, and the blood cloud centipede rushed out, smashing a fist toward Fengchen and Ji Yan. This time, Yiguchen directly activated the blood cloud centipede's power to the 9 transformations level. Be careful of this puppet. Ji Yan exclaimed when he felt the terrifying fluctuations from the blood cloud centipede's fist. He had suffered from the blood cloud centipede before. Your Highness, Ji Yan and I will hold off the blood cloud centipede. You should have no problem dealing with Yiguchen, who has lost all his true qi, right? Fengchen turned to Prince Yuani and said. No problem, I will kill him. Prince Yuani's eyes were cold. Boom. Boom. Fengchen held the black gold spear in his hand, while Ji Yan also took out his mysterious fire fan. The two of them directly clashed with the blood cloud centipede of the 9 transformations of the divine soul. Ripples of energy shook the surroundings like waves. On the other side, Pan Shuoyan was also fighting with Zither Fairy. Although Pan Shuoyan's cultivation was 2 levels higher than Zither Fairy's, Zither Fairy had her own means and would not be defeated in a short time. Yiguchen, you were indeed invincible in the infinite wilderness plain. Even I had to use all kinds of tricks to kill you, but you still managed to escape in the end. But now, you will definitely die. Prince Yuani's heavenly sacred 5 elemental will spun and a surge of 5 elemental mystic power flowed out of it, strengthening Prince Yuani. This. Yiguchen's eyes suddenly flashed. When Prince Yuani activated the heavenly sacred 5 element wheel, the 5-colored golden elixir in his body seemed to tremble slightly. That feeling was as if he had found food. Could it be? Yiguchen's lips curled into a faint smile. You are about to die, but you can still smile. Prince Yuani's face was cold as he punched out. 5 elements King Fist. He punched out, and the combination of his powerful genuine qi and 5 elements power seemed to transform into a 5-colored mountain, suppressing Yiguchen. Prince Yuani was the prince of the Saint Origin dynasty. After joining the Saint Origin Academy, all kinds of resources piled up on him, allowing his cultivation to reach the 3rd transformation of the divine soul. If it were an ordinary warrior in the qi refining realm, he would definitely be killed by Prince Yuani's punch. But Yiguchen was different. Boom! Yiguchen activated the indestructible body of Vajra. The surface of his body glowed with golden light, and Sanskrit flowed. He held the meteorite soft sword in his hand, and at the same time, he strengthened it with totem power. The sword momentum surged and spread like a raging fire. Boom! The two of them clashed. Yiguchen's fist split the sky, and his sword was like fire. The golden fist radiance intertwined with the blazing sword radiance. Even without the support of genuine chi, there was a terrifying fluctuation. Damn it, Yiguchen is really difficult to deal with. Prince Yuani's eyes twitched as he thought coldly. At the same time, his killing intent towards Yiguchen became even stronger. Yiguchen already had such strength without genuine chi. If he really recovered, Prince Yuani could not imagine how strong Yiguchen would be. Boom! 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 Prince Yuani punched out, and the 5 elements mountains appeared from the void, suppressing Yiguchen. Yiguchen activated the vermilion bird totem on his chest again, and at the same time, flames surged all over his body. The heavenly sun Xianming fire and vermilion bird divine fire surged out at the same time. Boom! A flaming sword radiance swept out in all directions, and the surrounding ground was scorched. Yiguchen had already comprehended the embryonic form of the fire sword essence. With the support of 2 kinds of flames and the power of the vermilion bird totem, the power of this sword was not weaker than the sword with the support of genuine chi. Bang! The 5 elements mystic force and the flaming sword radiance collided and wore each other down. Divine radiance burst out, and the surrounding ground rumbled. Dong! Yiguchen suddenly retreated, his body trembling as if he was unable to withstand the impact. Ha! Yiguchen, you're dead meat. Prince Yuani saw this and hurriedly took the opportunity to pour his vigorous genuine chi into the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel, and at the same time, control it with his soul power. With a whoosh, the heavenly sacred 5-element will seem to tear the void, and with an extremely sharp fluctuation, it slashed towards Yiguchen's head. This move was extremely fast and powerful. Even an expert in the 5th transformation of the divine soul realm would be seriously injured or even killed if careless. However, a cold light flashed in Yiguchen's eyes, and the corner of his mouth curled into a smile. This. Prince Yuani saw this and faintly felt that something was wrong, but he could not think of any other moves Yiguchen had. I've been waiting for this moment. Yiguchen directly drew on the power of the 5-colored golden elixir in his body, and then stretched out his hand. Golden light flowed in his palm, and he grabbed the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel that was tearing the void. You're courting death. Prince Yuani snorted. Whoosh! Yiguchen grabbed the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel with one hand, and his body suddenly retreated. His arm also made a cracking sound, and at the same time, blood spurted out from his palm. Although Yiguchen's physical body could withstand a spiritual inscription divine weapon, the heavenly sacred 5-element will had the 5 elements mystic force, and it was far from ordinary divine weapons. However, just as Prince Yuani's lips curled into a cold smile, the next moment, his smile froze. Buzz! Buzz! The 5-colored golden elixir in Yiguchen's body trembled violently, and a strange force flowed out, landing directly on the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel. Then, the 5 elements mystic force within was quickly absorbed by the 5-colored golden elixir. How is this possible? Prince Yuani shouted in disbelief as he felt the 5 elements mystic force being rapidly drained from the heavenly sacred 5-element wheel. However, it was already too late. In just a few breaths' time, the 5 elements mystic force within the heavenly sacred 5-element will have been completely absorbed by the 5-colored golden elixir. The entire wheel dimmed and turned into scrap metal. Yiguchen squeezed slightly, and the wheel shattered, turning into iron dust. The 5-colored golden elixir in his dantian was shining. Other than the vermilion bird and green dragon totem regions, the other 3 regions also lit up slightly. Although the other 3 totems were not as powerful as the vermilion bird and green dragon totems, they could also release their own powers. Prince Yuani, you're the one who will die today. Yiguchen's fist radiance split the sky, and a 5 elements totem force burst out. Chapter 308. It was Yiguchen's first time controlling the power of the 5 elements totem, so he was a little shaky. However, this did not hinder the power of this punch. Rumble. Yiguchen's invincible Vajra body, coupled with his physical strength and the power of the five elements totem, caused this punch to surge with golden light and fill the sky with five elements' divine brilliance. The air screamed and vibrated, and Prince Yuani's face turned pale. Once again, he took out a talisman and activated it with his true energy. Immediately, it formed a light screen that shielded his body behind him. Boom! Yiguchen's punch landed on the light screen, and the light screen shook violently with cracking sounds. Break! Yiguchen released the power of the dragon elephant from his perfect physical body. His blood chi was shocking, and with the power of the totem, he tore the protective light screen apart with a boom. Fang Chen, save me! Prince Yuani shouted as he retreated. He was traumatized by Yiguchen. Trash! On the other side, Fang Chen's face darkened as he cursed in his heart. If Prince Yuani was not the crown prince of the Saint Origin dynasty, Fang Chen would not have protected him. Swoosh! Fang Chen threw the black gold long spear, which was filled with violent true qi. It was like a black dragon, piercing towards Yiguchen. Yiguchen frowned slightly. He was confident that he could deal with Prince Yuani, but Fang Chen was obviously more difficult to deal with than Prince Yuani. He retreated abruptly. At the same time, Yiguchen controlled the blood cloud puppet to attack Ji Yan and Fang Chen with even more ferocious power. Boom! Bang! Bang! Ji Yan and Fang Chen were both forced to retreat. Without the protection of the black gold long spear, Fang Chen was obviously in a worse state, coughing up blood from the corner of his mouth. Prince Yuani's figure flickered, and he joined them. On the other side, Yiguchen controlled the blood cloud puppet to retreat with Zither Fairy. The two sides were once again in a standoff. While they were wary of each other, the atmosphere was tense. Yiguchen. The resentment in Prince Yuani's eyes could not be erased. On the other side, Yiguchen's expression remained calm, but he was thinking of a way to break out of this situation. This was because the demonic cloud blood crystal behind the blood cloud serpent's head was running out of energy. Can they unleash the power of the hidden latch of life and death for a short period of time? But if they have life-saving methods? Yiguchen pondered. Just as both sides were trying to figure out what was going on, a figure suddenly appeared in the dense forest not far away. Who is it? Both Pan Shuelian and Yiguchen looked over. The person who came was dressed in a light green dress. She had snow-white skin, starry eyes, and a fine nose. It was Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu, why are you here? Yiguchen was slightly surprised to see her. Senior brother Yi, sister Zither, you're here. Mu Xingzu saw Yiguchen and Zither Fairy and immediately rushed over. Senior brother Yi, ghost, there's a ghost. Mu Xingzu grabbed Yiguchen's sleeve and panicked. Ghost. Yiguchen's gaze froze, and he was even more puzzled. On the other side, when Pan Shuelian and the others saw that it was Mu Xingzu, they were slightly relieved. In their eyes, a Qi refinement realm martial artist was as insignificant as an ant. You came at the right time. Yiguchen, I'll personally torture that little girl to death in front of you later. Prince Yuani's hatred for Yiguchen was unquenchable. Shameless boasting. Yiguchen's eyes flashed with cold lightning as they pierced through the void. Just as both sides were about to draw their swords and the flames of war were about to ignite. A faint voice could be heard coming from somewhere. 1,000 years on the broken blue bridge, Jun Wen's return is uncertain. Who is it now? Pan Shuelian, Prince Yuani, and the others were puzzled as they scanned their surroundings. When Mu Xingzu heard this, her face revealed even more fear. Her voice trembled as she said, Senior brother Yi, the ghost is here. What exactly is it? In the face of such an unknown existence, even Yiguchen was extremely vigilant. Unknowingly, the surroundings were covered in fog. A vast expanse of white mist shrouded the dried riverbed and the dark blue ancient bridge in a hazy mist. Senior brother Yi, look over there. Mu Xingzu's eyes suddenly widened as if she had seen something unbelievable. She pointed at the dark blue stone bridge. Everyone here, including Yi Guqin, turned their gaze to the stone bridge. On the stone bridge, a graceful blue figure stood there calmly. Is that the ghost? Yi Guqin focused his gaze. The fear in Mu Xingzu's eyes gradually turned into curiosity and confusion. This was because the blue figure was not that terrifying and did not inspire fear in others. It was a woman. She wore a long blue dress that outlined her slender and graceful figure. Her face was graceful with a sense of gentleness. Her skin was snow white and her eyes were like stars. One look at her and one could not help but sigh. She was as beautiful as a painting. However, what made Yi Guqin and the others faintly shocked was that the figure was not real. It was half illusory. Primordial spirit. Zither Fairy covered her red lips, her beautiful eyes filled with shock. How is this possible? On the other side, Pan Shuoyan, Fang Chen, and the others were also a little shocked. Even if a sky palace supremacy turned their consciousness into a soul palace, they could not give birth to a primordial spirit. A humanoid primordial spirit was a realm that only a higher-level expert could come into contact with. No, even if it is a primordial spirit, without special means, it will be worn down by time. How can it exist in the form of a primordial spirit? Zither Fairy was extremely shocked. She had read about this in the library of the Lingxi Palace when she had nothing to do. Just as everyone was puzzled by the sudden appearance of this strange figure, a figure suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The blue-robed woman who existed in the form of a primordial spirit spoke in a faint voice. 1,000 years since the Blue Bridge of Broken Love, Jun Wen's return has yet to be determined. Whoever crosses this bridge will be able to obtain my opportunity. With that, the blue-robed woman turned around. Her clothes fluttered, and her figure disappeared into the fog. It's the opportunity of the cave abode. As long as you cross this bridge, you can obtain it. At this moment, Pan Shuoyan, Fang Chen, Ji Yan, and the others' eyes were burning with joy. In the beginning, their main goal was still Yi Guqin. After all, the opportunity with Yi Guqin was great. However, now that they saw the woman in the form of a primordial spirit, they all knew that the opportunity of the cave abode was absolutely precious. It was even a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. At this moment, even Prince Yuanyi temporarily put aside his hatred for Yi Guqin. The four of them directly rushed towards the dark blue stone bridge. Let's go too. Zither Fairy's beautiful eyes were also filled with excitement. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. However, he knew that if they could obtain the opportunity as long as they could cross the stone bridge, it would be too simple. There must be a test on the stone bridge. Yi Guqin was vigilant. He did not believe that this mysterious woman in the primordial spirit would give up the opportunity so easily. Xingzhu, you have to be careful. If you feel that it's dangerous, then stay here. Yi Guqin turned to Mu Xingzhu and said. Although the opportunity was good, it was not so easy to obtain. No. Xingzhu wants to try. Furthermore, Xingzhu feels that she shouldn't be a bad person, Mu Xingzhu said. Alright, but safety first. Yi Guqin nodded slightly and did not say anything. He did not have the right to help Mu Xingzhu make a choice. After that, Yi Guqin and the other two stepped onto the dark blue stone bridge together. The moment they stepped onto the stone bridge, the blue crystal pendant on Mu Xingzhu's jade neck flashed with a faint light again. Chapter 309. Yi Guqin stepped onto the dark blue stone bridge. He was surrounded by white fog. As far as the eye could see, it was boundless. As soon as Yi Guqin stepped onto the stone bridge, he felt a terrifying soul pressure. However, it only lasted for a moment before it dissipated. Is it the primordial soul stage woman? Yi Guqin was puzzled. Who was that woman? Why was she wandering around like a lonely soul? What was the meaning of the sentence, love is broken on the blue bridge for 1,000 years, Jun Wen's return is uncertain? Why was her primordial soul able to remain intact for so long? All of these made Yi Guchen curious. However, he only knew that the primordial soul stage woman's attainments in soul strength were definitely terrifying. Yi Guchen even believed that if the blue-robed woman was willing, she would be able to destroy everyone's divine soul with her soul pressure in less than a breath's time. What kind of existence is a primordial soul? Yi Guchen's eyes shone with a glimmer of light. The highest level of cultivation that he knew of was the Honorable Heavenly Palace. As for the higher levels, he was still unable to come into contact with them in the Saint Origin dynasty. However, this also made Yi Guchen realize that there was always someone better than him. The road of cultivation was still very long. Suppressing the chaotic emotions in his heart, Yi Guchen continued walking on the stone bridge. 15 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, in the end, after walking for 6 hours, Yi Guchen was still walking on the bridge. The front, the back, and the surroundings were all covered in fog. It was impossible to see anything clearly. Is this the test? Yi Guchen was not surprised at all. Moreover, he was sure that this test should be related to one's state of mind and soul. This was because the primordial soul stage woman should be best at this. However, if it was any other test, Yi Guchen might have some concerns. However, if it was a test of one's state of mind, Yi Guchen could completely ignore it. Not to mention that Yi Guchen's sword demon state of mind was incomparably tough. Coupled with the experience of the 9 lives of Azura in the 18-blood prison, Yi Guchen's state of mind was like a diamond that could not be cracked. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, in the end, even Yi Guchen did not know how long he had been walking. Perhaps he had walked for a day, perhaps a year, or perhaps 10 years, of course, this was an illusion. Time was blurry. It was just a feeling. 1,000 years on the blue bridge of broken love. Do I really have to walk on this stone bridge for 1,000 years? Yi Guchen thought about this and shook his head. He suddenly felt that the loneliness he was experiencing right now might be the same as what the blue-robed woman had experienced in the past. At this moment, 2 beautiful figures suddenly appeared in front of the stone bridge. They were hazy in the fog. Yi Guchen slowly frowned with a trace of vigilance. However, when Yi Guchen got closer and saw the 2 figures, even with his temperament, he could not help but reveal a faint look of astonishment on his face. These 2 beautiful figures were not Zither Fairy and Mu Xingzhu. Instead, they were 2 people that he had never expected to see. One of them was dressed in a snow-white dress and had an elegant and graceful figure. Her face was as bright as the moon, shining brightly. Her eyebrows were picturesque and her appearance was peerless. In particular, there was a trace of sadness and sorrow between her eyebrows. It was even more moving and unforgettable. Situ Hongxue. Yi Guchen's tone was a little shaky. His gaze turned to the other figure again. She was dressed in a green dress and her delicate figure was like a green lotus. She was full of fresh vitality. She had an oval-shaped face with white skin and curved eyebrows. Her eyes were as clear as a lake, and her tender red lips always had a warm and pure smile. As her footsteps moved, the silver bells on her fair ankles swayed along with her movements, emitting a series of crisp sounds. Who else could such a beautiful girl be but Su Jianshi? Yi Guchen pursed his lips slightly. He was not happy because of the appearance of these 2 beauties. At this moment, the ethereal voice of a woman came from the void. If you choose the right person, you will succeed and pass this bridge. It's the primordial soul stage woman. Yi Guchen thought to himself when he heard this voice. He looked at the 2 beauties again. If you choose the right person, you will succeed and pass this bridge. Yi Guchen slowly frowned. Although he knew that this was an illusion, Yi Guchen felt extremely complicated when facing these 2 beauties. There was helplessness and guilt. Although he was the sword devil and wielded a sword, it was difficult for him to break the entanglement of emotions. Yi Guchen, I can overlook the mistakes you've made in the past. As long as you're willing to be with me. Situ Hongxue's voice was filled with sadness. She sounded extremely sorrowful, but at the same time, she was also filled with love. Su Jianshi placed her hands on her waist and pouted. She glanced at Yi Guqin and spoke with a voice as clear as a silver bell. Silly boy, you said that you will be my vice leader. Are you going to break your promise? Situ Hongxue. Su Jianshi. Yi Guqin closed his eyes before opening them again. Yi Guqin felt guilty towards these two beauties. There was no need to mention Situ Hongxue. Even after knowing his identity as the Sword Devil of Bloodheart Tower, Situ Hongxue still didn't do anything to him. This was Yi Guqin's debt towards Situ Hongxue. As for Su Jianshi, she used her body to block Gu Xiaoyang's killing blow. It was also because of this blow that she remained unconscious until now. Yi Guqin also felt guilty. His eyes were like stars as he looked at the illusions of the two beauties before him. He could also vaguely feel that there seemed to be a pair of eyes watching him from the dark. This test and choice is truly difficult to understand. There is no perfect solution in this world that doesn't betray one's sword heart or love, but Yi Guqin suddenly took out his meteor sword. At this moment, his eyes were as sharp as a sword. The sword heart is my heart and my heart is the sword heart. I will bear the responsibility for what I have done. This choice is not difficult for me, Yi Guqin. In the next moment, Yi Guqin unsheathed his sword. It was graceful and beautiful. It was very slow and gentle like a lover whispering to one's ear. With one slash, the illusion was destroyed. The illusions of Situ Hongxue and Su Jianshi smiled before disappearing. Then, the blue-clothed woman appeared in front of Yi Guqin. She slowly extended her jade-like hand and formed a sword with 2 fingers. Yi Guqin could sense a terrifying soul force from the blue-shirt lady. The ripple of her soul was even stronger than that of a martial highness. What's the name of this sword? The blue-clothed woman's beautiful face seemed to be in a daze as she stared at the sword. If the heavens have emotions, Yi Guqin replied. If the heavens have emotions, what a great name. If the heavens truly had emotions, why wouldn't they let him see me? The blue-clothed woman smiled with tears in her eyes. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. He felt that the blue-clothed woman seemed to be someone with a story. You passed, the blue-clothed woman's figure disappeared. In the next moment, Yi Guqin was standing at the bridgehead. Chapter 310. Yi Guqin stood at the head of the bridge. For a moment, he was still a little dazed. After all, he felt as if he had walked for a long time on the stone bridge. He turned his head. The dark blue stone bridge was still shrouded in a thick fog. However, under Yi Guqin's investigation, he was shocked to find that the white fog was actually an incomparably pure soul power. Such means. Yi Guqin could not help but sigh in his heart. He was moved by the blue-robed woman's means and strength. Senior brother Yi. Not far away, Mu Xingzu's figure suddenly appeared and rushed towards Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. After some investigation, he confirmed that Mu Xingzu was not an illusion. Xingzhu, have you passed the test? Yi Guqin was a little puzzled as he looked at Mu Xingzu in front of him. Even he had spent so much time here. However, from the looks of it, Mu Xingzhu seemed to have been here for a long time. Test? What test? Senior brother Yi, didn't you walk over directly from the bridge? Mu Xingzu asked with a puzzled expression. Yi Guqin's eyes dimmed. He sensed that things were not as simple as they seemed. At this moment, in the pavilion at the foot of the barren mountain not far away, the blue-robed woman's figure appeared again. She leaned against the edge of the pavilion and looked at Yi Guqin, who was standing at the head of the bridge. It's her. Mu Xingzu was still surprised when she saw this, but she was no longer as fearful as before. A picturesque beauty like the blue-robed woman would only make people have a good impression of her. He sensed that the blue-robed woman's eyes seemed to be filled with deep affection and infatuation when she looked at him. This made Yi Guqin slowly frown. However, he was certain that although the blue-robed woman was looking at him, she was not looking at him. She was looking at someone in her memories. 1,000 years on the Blue Bridge, Jun Wen's return is uncertain. Ning has been waiting for a very, very long time, but you still haven't returned. The blue-robed woman who called herself Ning spoke as if she was talking to herself. Her eyes were filled with infatuation and reminiscence, as well as a faint trace of resentment. Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu were smart enough not to disturb Ning. After a long while, Ning seemed to have regained her senses. The infatuation in her eyes dissipated and was replaced by clarity. She looked at Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu and said, "Actually, passing the test of the stone bridge is just a formality. The real opportunity is already destined." Mu Xingzu looked puzzled. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed as if he had understood something. "You are the one who can obtain my opportunity." Ning stretched out her finger and pointed at Mu Xingzu. "Me?" Mu Xingzu was stunned for a moment and couldn't come back to her senses. As expected, Yi Guqin was enlightened. When Mu Xingzu said that she had walked directly across the stone bridge, Yi Guqin had already noticed some clues. "Don't you want to fight for it? After all, you used your own strength to pass the test. As for the others, they should still be struggling on the bridge." Ning turned her gaze to Yi Guqin. "I was entrusted by someone, so I don't have any thoughts about it," Yi Guqin said frankly. "Don't speak too soon. Do you know what the opportunity I'm giving you is?" After Ning finished speaking, a spot of light suddenly appeared between her eyebrows. A transparent bead appeared from within. This bead was like a glass bead, but there was endless soul power rolling like fog inside it. "This is..." Yi Guqin looked at it. "This is my innate divine ability as an 8th grade prodigy, the immortal soul bead," Ning said. "An 8th grade prodigy with an innate divine ability." Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu were extremely surprised. The ranks of prodigies ranged from the 1st to the 9th grade, followed by the rarer 10th grade prodigy supreme. A 7th grade prodigy like Yi Guqin was considered rare in the entire Nantian region. As for 8th grade prodigies, they were even rarer. As for innate divine abilities, all prodigies above the 7th grade would have them. For example, Gu Xiaoyang's stellar eyes and Yi Guqin's innate sword embryo. This girl named Ning's innate divine ability was the immortal soul bead that was stored in her mind. The innate divine ability of an 8th grade prodigy was an unimaginable opportunity. It was even more precious than obtaining swordsmanship or elixirs. Otherwise, Gu Xiaoyang wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to rob Yi Guqin of his innate sword embryo. "Are you tempted?" Ning looked at Yi Guqin with a faint look in her eyes. "Although it's precious, it belongs to the destined one," Yi Guqin said indifferently. "Oh, right, I forgot that you're a sword cultivator. Then, what about this?" Ning unleashed her soul power again. That intangible soul power seemed to burst forth with an unparalleled sword essence. That kind of sword essence didn't attack the physical body, but the soul. "This is..." Yi Guqin's eyes trembled again. "This is a peerless soul sword essence," Ning said with a deep look in her eyes. "An 8th grade prodigy, an immortal soul bead, and a peerless soul sword essence. No one could resist such a great opportunity." The immortal soul bead was undoubtedly beneficial to the cultivation of soul power. As for the soul sword essence, it could directly attack the soul in the sea of consciousness of others. It was strange and overbearing. Ning, even in the Void Sword sect in ancient times, I'm afraid she was an absolute god's favored daughter. Yi Guqin sighed secretly. "You're Yi Guqin, right?" "As long as you get rid of the only opponent beside you, I might change my mind and pass on the immortal soul bead and the soul sword essence to you," Ning said faintly. Mu Xingzu, who was standing to one side, was also a little hesitant. Then, she mustered up her courage and said, "Senior brother Yi, Xingzhu thinks that these opportunities are most suitable for senior brother Yi, so if you need them, Xingzhu, in your eyes, am I such a person?" Yi Guqin's eyes were incomparably calm as he turned to look at Ning. "Senior, there's no need for such a test. To be honest, although sword essence is somewhat attractive to me, I don't lack sword essence. Yi Guqin's tone was indifferent. What he said was indeed the truth. Whether it was the edgeless sword essence or the 5 elements sword essence that he might comprehend, Yi Guqin did not lack sword essences that he could comprehend. Of course, if it were under other possible circumstances, Yi Guqin would not mind obtaining the soul sword essence. However, under such circumstances, it was obviously not possible. I've underestimated you, but unfortunately, my opportunity can only belong to her. Ying Ning looked at Mu Xingzu with a hint of gentleness in her eyes. Why? Why, senior, how can Xingzhu? Mu Xingzu was also a little confused. Because the heavenly sea soul essence hanging around your neck was given to me by him before he left. Ying Ning's figure floated to the front of Mu Xingzu and raised her hand slightly. The teardrop-shaped blue crystal pendant hanging around Mu Xingzu's neck fell into Ying Ning's hand. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.